well, if you want to. Do I need to?
No, I guess not. Probably not. Much clarity on what that was.
Yeah, I think I need to circle back with Nina and
Okay, great.
Todd first.
Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday, August 9th, 2018 meeting of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District Board of Directors. I am Board President Rochelle Sherris-Watt, and I will now take roll. Director Deppie?
Here.
Director Hassai?
Here.
Director Welsh?
Here.
Vice President Natoli?
Here.
We are returning from closed session, and the board has nothing to report out on actions this evening. We'll now take public comments on items not appearing on the agenda.
That might be better. I'll try that again. Good evening. My name is Rodney Paul. First, I want to thank you all for your service to our community. I do not take that for granted. I know you guys put a lot of hours into serving on this board, and I personally appreciate that very much. I want to talk to you about the public paths in Kensington. Many of us are concerned about the future of these paths and their important potential for safety. This is especially relevant right now during this terrible fire season that we're having in California, and our governor is saying this is the new normal, and we really need to think of these paths as an important safety resource in our community. They could be a way for people to evacuate from the upper areas of Kensington, and also could be very important for fire and police personnel to access areas that could be blocked from traffic. Berkeley recently had a very large mapping and survey event, and they went through all of the paths in Berkeley looking for things that needed to be improved to make them safer for egress. I think we really need to follow their example and take these paths very seriously as a resource available to us. Now, the paths have not been owned by anybody since their inception, so they were created in the early 1900s, and there was an effort to turn them over to the county that never went through. So they've been in limbo all these years, and as a result, some property owners have taken them over. The Kensington Improvement Club, of which I'm a member and I had served on the board of that, does work parties to clear the paths, to sweep them up, to do weeding. Gretchen Gilfillian has led this effort, and it's a great asset to our community that we're doing this. But a few years ago, somebody tripped on one of the paths, on the Ardmore path, and KIC got sued over this. The adjacent property owners, other public agencies, including yourselves, was sued for this. And KIC actually had to pay the largest amount when the settlement was reached, which to me seems really unfair, that volunteers who are just out of the goodness of their hearts maintaining these paths were the ones that had to pay the amount. I will say KIC had insurance and did come from the insurance, but this is no way to really maintain these paths. So we really need to solve this issue, and I'm just telling you this as information. I'm working with Lisa Corona and Mark Altenberg. We're trying to create an effort to find a solution that would work, working with the county, with KPPCSD and KFD. But just want to let you know that's going on, and that this is something that's of great concern to many of us in Kensington. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you go away, I don't remember, does Berkeley own its paths, or are they in the...
Berkeley, I believe, I believe they do own their paths, and the Berkeley Path Wanderers Association had an effort to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
This is a brief comment or a question really about an item that
is on the agenda, but it's not about the substance of the item. So I'd appreciate it if the chair or council could tell me if now is the right time to bring it up or later when the item comes up. You have item 7A, administrative study, and there are various exhibits that are part of that. I had resort to the district website and to the policy manual, which is listed thereon, which I assume is still the in-force policy manual, although there's a note that says that it's under revision. If there are revisions that affect this, I don't see them, so if somebody could let me know, I'd appreciate it. Anyway, the point of my comment is this. In the policy manual, section 2010, there is a provision that has to do with personnel of the district, and it specifies that there shall be a, quote, administrative assistant / district secretary and Kensington Park administrator, one person. That position currently has an incumbent, and I understand that item 7A on the agenda has to do with reorganizing that position and perhaps creating others. It strikes me that these amount to amendments of the policy manual. If I'm mistaken, let me know. Section 5020.10 says that in order to consider adopting or amending any policy, directors shall have the opportunity to review the proposed adoption or amendment at the regular board meeting prior to the meeting at which consideration for adoption or amendment is to be given. The basic report here is dated July 11th. There was no regular board meeting in July 11. Therefore, the material on the agenda, by definition, cannot have been considered at the regular meeting prior to this meeting. Therefore, I think that it is improper to have approval and implementation on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to look? It says park administrator. Do you want to examine that or tell us?
I believe that all of those functions would fall under the umbrella responsibilities of the district general manager, actually.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't think everybody heard that. Ann, could you say that again, please?
Of course, I think that all of those responsibilities actually fall under the umbrella responsibilities of the general manager, who's responsible for all the district functions.
And in fact, the park administrator is separate, has been separated in the past. I know that actually the job descriptions that are listed in our policy manual are not correct with what is currently happening in the district.
Then we should rectify the inconsistency.
Okay, great. We shall do that.
Good evening. I am Peter Liddell, and this is Katie Gluck. I'm sorry, I should have reversed that. And we are the Kensington Public Safety Council. I'm here to talk about the local hazard mitigation plan. And I'd like to point out that it doesn't require any financial or reporting commitment from the district. It simply shows the county, the state, and FEMA that we have analyzed risks for potential hazards and prioritized them in terms of severity and likelihood. An approved LHMP will allow us to apply for grants. We've requested this be agendized for approval for several months, but have gotten nada. The fire district approved their hazard mitigation plan months ago. So we're now again requesting that the approval of the KPPCSD Local Hazard Mitigation Plan be agendized for approval at the September 13th board meeting.
I would like to add also that this LHMP has already been approved by the county. I'd like to add also that I'd like to add that the LHMP has already been approved by the county and by the state and by FEMA. So we're just waiting for the board's approval.
Yes, I sent an email earlier this week or late last week that assured you that I apologized. We thought we could have it on this agenda and that it was on the September 13th.
Yes, and included in your email, you said that you also wanted to have it run through by the attorney for any liabilities. I would say just get in touch with the fire department because they approved theirs a couple of months ago, several months ago, and there's no need to run up our bill any further.
I have a question. You said that approval will allow us to apply for grants. What does that mean, us to apply for grants? Who's
The
us?
district, right? And can you
Yes.
explain that a little bit, Peter, or somebody? What's the grant potential?
Well, this will come up on the agenda.
Okay, I just wanted to know if us was the district, we can discuss this. Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
Yes,
Okay,
the police district.
thank you. Thank you, Walt.
A. Stephen Still. First of all, I want to say hello to all 5 directors who are here tonight. This is actually the first regular meeting in 2 months, yet there was no consent calendar for approval of past minutes. The last approved minutes were for March 8th. There is no monthly packet with the unaudited profit and loss, but Ricky has provided handouts for the police statistics for the last 2 months. There was a 1 p.m. special meeting last week to attend to business originally scheduled in July. I was unable to attend, but the agenda stated that it would be audio and video recorded. It was not. Was any recording made? Were minutes taken? And if so, when will they be made available? I realize that directors have been on vacation and that it was not possible in July to hold either regular meeting because a quorum of 3 directors could not be managed. I do not think it is reasonable to expect that our unpaid directors should coordinate their vacations and personal businesses well in advance to assure that there are regular meetings on the second and fourth Thursday of every month. However, counting tonight, there have been only 9 of 15 regular meetings this year. It seems to me that the board should do better, or perhaps go back to 1 regular meeting a month. I know that later tonight you will cancel the August 23rd meeting. Will you make sure that at the next meeting in September, you catch up on minutes of past meetings and monthly reports? In another matter, during the last several weeks, I have stopped by the district office numerous times, but it has not been open, although the sign indicates the hours are 9 to 4. It also says, ring the doorbell, and if no one answers, pick up the red phone to connect to dispatch. I assume that is the Albany Police Dispatcher, which certainly would not have been appropriate in my situation. I did ring the doorbell on 2 occasions, and each time a Kensington officer came to the door. It would be better if a scant number of police officers were on patrol, not answering the door at the district office. At a minimum, the sign needs to be changed to provide better information.
Thank you. All right, if there are no further public comments, I will now hear from the staff and the board. Any board comments?
Not at this time.
I just have a brief comment. I had mentioned this at our last meeting, but because there wasn't well attended, those of you who drop off kids on the north end of Hilltop School, there's going to be some changes on the signage once the county can attend to it. They're waiting for signs, apparently. You will no longer be able to park on Highland. That's going to be for drop-off only. And on Arlmont, you will be able to park to walk your child to the school. They're also going to implement some changes on the crosswalk at Coventry so that cars turning right from Arlington will have to go a little bit slower. It will take a little bit more time to do a proper crosswalk there, but they are working on that. And with respect to an issue that was brought up at a recent fire board meeting, for those residents that are on cul-de-sac streets like York, St. Albans, and Windsor, if you want to gather your neighbors and agree that the parking should be on the side of the street that will allow all your cars to be facing out instead of into the cul-de-sac, the county is willing to work with you to make that change if the neighbors want those changes made. Thanks.
I actually forgot, I did have something. One question for Director Natoli is, do you know anything about the timing for the sign on Highland or Arlmont?
I have been bugging the county for the last 2 months, so
Okay.
I can continue to bug them,
Thank
and
you.
maybe they'll be tired of my bugging them.
All right, school starts August 20th. I meant to give folks an update, and if I missed anything, I hope Director Shever-Swat, who attended the KMAC meeting last week in my absence, can jump in. But the process for the community center renovation has took another step forward. There was a bit of a holdup with the county, and they required the plans to go in front of the KMAC, which happened July 31st, and it was recommended for approval and moved on to the county. And I believe that on August 11th might be the first day that we could pull a permit for the plans for the renovation. So things are happening, and at the moment, we are thinking that we won't be using this space after November 1st, but that situation is very fluid, and we're going to continue to keep in touch with the groups that use the center. But we've been talking about this for quite a few months and letting folks know that they would be needing to think about alternative spaces. And in an abundance of caution, we're looking at November 1st as a date, but as the process unravels, it's an iterative process, and it's very hard to be definitive until we take the next step forward. Thank you.
Yes, kind of dovetails to what Elaine said. On September 20th, Elaine and I are hosting a community traffic meeting that will be here 7 to 10 p.m. We're going to have a representative from the county, Munish Sen, Ricky Hole, and possibly somebody from John Joy's office. I'm still waiting to hear. And it won't be a board meeting. It's going to be an informal community meeting. The purpose will be twofold at least. It's going to be an open format, but my idea was to give citizens a chance to hear from the county and from the chief of police and possibly board members to understand where the responsibilities lie. We get questions all the time about, could you put a stop sign in, or who's controlling this about traffic? And sometimes it's confusing to know where the county responsibilities end and where ours begin. So hopefully this meeting will allow people to ask and clarify that. It'll also allow people to just voice their concerns about traffic and have a place that they can come and talk to the people who are in charge of doing something about traffic. So again, that's September 20th, 7 to 10 p.m. Hope to get an article in the Outlook. I'll probably put something on the website if that's allowed. And maybe Nixle, I don't know, we should talk about if Nixle's appropriate. We'll try to get the word out, but so mark your calendars.
I should give an update on one little issue. Fire board meeting before last, I went to the board and asked them to consider working with us jointly to fund the seismic retrofit part of the upgrade of this community center. And my reasoning was that avoiding an emergency that would require their response, such as the building collapsing during an earthquake, is as much within their mandate and spending authority as it is within ours. And so I said it would be nice if we could come up with some sort of meeting to discuss how we might work together to fund this community center upgrade in the manner most effective as far as spending the taxpayers' money is concerned. So I expect those discussions to continue. I got a pretty good reception from them, and I'll provide further updates as those discussions proceed.
All right, thank you. Ann or Tony? Okay, yes, I think Chief Hull is definitely, hopefully going to talk about National Night Out.
Hello, everyone. Ricky Hull. First, I'd just like to acknowledge the district's participation in National Night Out. We had a total of 9 parties. I was able to attend 7 of them, and they all had a very enthusiastic crowd. So I would like to acknowledge everyone's participation in that. I also want to acknowledge Officer Wilkins. She coordinated the National Night Out event this year and last year, and they have both been successful. So kudos to Officer Wilkins. I also would like to make a comment. In October, we are going to start a Coffee with a Cop program. The first Wednesday of October is National Coffee with a Cop Day. So I kind of plan to kick that off on that day. And we will probably be running a Coffee with a Cop once per month. So be ready to hear news from that. You'll be receiving a NIXL notice and possibly an email.
Could you repeat that date? I'm sorry.
The first Wednesday in October.
Okay.
I don't know the exact date.
October 3rd,
Yes,
I believe.
October 3rd. Second, I would like to make a quick comment about recruiting. Currently, we still have 2 individuals that are still in the background process. We contract out with the Alameda Sheriff's Department to conduct our backgrounds on our applicants, and I was contacted by another person who expressed interest. So hopefully we'll have a third that will complete an application. I also want to make mention to, you will see in the police department statistical data that I handed out for the last 2 months. You will see that on the issue of traffic enforcement, you will see how the numbers have been trending downward. I've had an administrative meeting concerning those numbers. There are several things at work here. One of them, we're having officers who are still out doing patrol. The mileage on the cars and the gas bills reflect that. Some traffic stops are being conducted, but they're not being captured in the CAD. So that's up to the administration to fix. But the numbers reflected in these statistics they're low, they're extremely low, and that will be fixed going forward, and you should not see this again. Another comment real quick about NIXL. We have not been having a lot of events to have NIXL notices sent, and that is reflective of a good thing, because contiguous agencies are suffering some property crimes that we are not suffering here in Kensington. I believe the reason for that is directly due to the officers that we have that are out patrolling, contacting people and being seen is responsible for those numbers. So I would just like to say that, again, appreciate everyone for participating in National Night Out, and I'll take any questions anyone might have. Yes, ma'am.
Where is the Coffee with the Cop? Where does that happen?
It will be in different places. The first, you will get a notice concerning this about the place and the time. But the first one will be at the Inn Kensington at 1 p.m. So I have plans on having them at different locations at different times so that people who may be busy and that might not be compatible to their schedule will still be able to attend.
We will make sure that Coffee with a Cop is on our website, and NIXL, as well as flyers on kiosks around town.
Yes, sir. 1 second.
Can you tell us how many officers down we are still from the full complement?
The district has a budget for 10 sworn positions. We currently have 7 sworn positions full, and we have 3 sworn positions open.
There's a 20-fold difference between traffic stops and other OIA incidents. What are the OIA incidents?
Could you
Can you repeat the question?
for the
The acronym.
monitor?
It's an acronym. It's
So what are they?
Officer-involved accident.
I'll answer that in a minute. Give me a minute. I'll step to your side. Is there any further questions anyone might have?
I think we owe you a cup of coffee for if you can stump the word, do the.
Well, if it's an A, if officer-initiated activity, that's it. Officer-initiated activity. Thanks for your help. Yes, oh, go ahead, hold on, go ahead. It could be a litany of things. It could be what an officer are starting themselves. It could be an outside assist. You know, it could be a litany of things. I'll have to look into that one to give you more of a direct answer. Yes, ma'am.
The question is from Linda Spath, and she's asking if the Albany dispatch system is fully up and running and implemented.
The Albany dispatch system is fully up and running and it's fully implemented. However, there are still a few glitches in the system that we're trying to work out. The biggest one has to do with the MDTs, which are the mobile computers inside the vehicles, because they work on cell phone air cards, and in the hills, the connection is spotty. So they don't always work as they should. So we're still working that out.
But you would have radio contact with Albany Dispatch if you needed that. It's just you're talking about the computer talking to Albany Dispatch.
That's correct.
Yeah, this is sort of trivial, but I see this appear every month. Site core, which is citation correction. Why are there have to be corrections in citations? Are there mistakes made? And can you
Can we please repeat the question? A. Stevens Delk and
Yeah, that's, Dr. Delk's question is asked, on the statistical sheet, there's a designation called site correction, and she's asking what would happen with that. That could be something very minute. You could have an officer write a section on a ticket, and it could be something as minute as a subsection that's incorrect. So they just send the tickets back, we make the proper correction, then we just send them back to the courts. Hold on one, Sergeant Barrow.
That's actually people coming in for a site correction, like their registration wasn't good, or they had something wrong with their car, like a whiteout. The officers actually dispatched to them. So, we actually sign off their citations, so they take it to court, pay their fine, or fix their.
So that's a fix-it ticket, is that what you're saying?
It's an actual detail, we are detailed to.
can someone just repeat for the,
Yeah, unfortunately, we're probably not going to be able to take this question and answer forward unless people are coming forward. But if you have a question of general interest, that's wonderful. But if it's specific, maybe you want to speak to Chief Hull after the meeting. Sir.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all the officers who participated in National Night Out. It was a huge success, and thank you to those wonderful block party organizers, because it takes a lot of work. And my neighbor did a wonderful job, and I'm sure yours did too. We are moving on to item 7, old business. Bob Dice with Management Strategies Group is here to present his Phase 2 report from his administrative study. Director Constantoris, excuse me, General Manager Constantoris, would you like to introduce this?
Well, thank you for the promotion, Madam President. As long as I don't take any questions from the gentleman in the audience that stumped the chief, I'm fine.
Hey, that's not a promotion, that's a pay cut.
Before Mr. Dice makes his presentation, I did have just a couple of comments. I wanted the board to know I've now been the general manager a little over a year here at the district. And when I first started, I did notice that there were some inefficiencies in the organization, but I wanted time to review the organization and see if sometimes problems are self-correcting, or you could have a misinformed viewpoint or opinion at first. In time, I noticed that these inefficiencies included that there was insufficient staff at the district to do all the functions that the board wanted, that the board was filling in to do that work. The board members were actually performing some of the staff work. And I also noticed as a result, some key functions in the organization were not being completed. So I called on Mr. Dice to do a review, an independent review, to see if these observations conform to my viewpoint or what suggestions he had. I wanted to note, too, that I was talking to Mr. Dice a little earlier, and that I believe I'm the first generalist manager in the district. I think the district in the past has had police chiefs that had administrative functions, but no experience as a general manager, as a generalist manager. And in fact, the amount of time that, and I'm sorry to say this to you or embarrass you, but I think together we have about 75 years experience.
10 for me, I don't know about him.
And that part of that experience is that we form our own independent opinions and viewpoints, and we sometimes don't always agree with the board, but that has been the case with me, that these are my independent opinions and viewpoints. They are my recommendations. I think that's what the board hired me for and wants from a general manager. And that sometimes it is up to the board to agree, not approve, or ask any questions. And I think that the internal organization is really largely invisible to the general public. It doesn't seem, as long as work is getting done, they really don't see it. And I can tell you as a manager that it is the foundation of a good organization. Without a foundation, without the proper staffing, the proper allocation of duties, things go a little haywire. Things don't get done, things get misplaced. It just happens that Kensington does not have that excellent foundation. And so we invited Mr. Dice to make a presentation. He did present earlier in November in his initial findings. This is not the first time we've discussed this. We've been reviewing this for the past year. And I don't know, is this the second or third time he's made a presentation here to the board? Second time, okay. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Dice.
Well, thank you. I made hard copies of my presentation because the PowerPoint or the AV system here is not very legible. I asked how many copies to make. I made 30, not expecting 50 to show up, so I apologize, but I'm going to go through it as if you don't have a copy. So I'm going to go through a little bit more detail, and I'm going to make sure you have a copy on your web page as well. As the general manager mentioned, he had some initial observations and asked me to do sort of a high-level review, and then I reported out to your board in November of my findings. And as Tony mentioned, this is the first general manager. It's always been police chief / general manager. And in order to get a seasoned experienced general manager, you had to pay a labor market competitive wage. And quite frankly, it's on the lower side of the continuum, but I think it's competitive. But in order to maintain or stay within your budget, the general manager had to be part-time. And the thinking was 2 to 3 days a week. And so the general manager shows up, and he's quickly finding himself just mired in transactional detail. Details that somebody that we're paying for him with his skill sets, probably not the most cost-effective thing for the district to do. He's finding himself more and more difficult to stay within those part-time parameters. He's also concerned about the things that weren't being done, that haven't been assigned, and concerned about scope creep, not wanting to go full-time. So he asked me to take a look and evaluate how duties are distributed, and I did that and reported out in November, and I'm going to give you, just to repeat the highlights very, very quickly. But in November, I talked about, I deal with a lot of jurisdictions that have issues they're dealing with up and down the state. And I've developed a model to explain to the public and board members just what do governments do, what do public agencies do, and how do you break it out so people understand. And there's really 3 building blocks in a public agency. The first building block, which I think separates public agencies a lot out compared to the private sector because of transparency. Everybody sees and knows, by and large, what the district does. And so how you conduct business is very, very critical. It's not just what you accomplish, it's how you accomplish it. Your ethics, your standards, how you manage your finances, how you hire people, board direction, general manager direction, the ethics of the corporation, the public agency, that's all part of that first building block. And if you fail at that, then you fail at everything else. So that's got to be in place. The next building block is your services, your bread and butter services that public agencies provide. And for you, that's obviously police, this community center, parks and recreation, and solid waste. And the third level is what I call innovation and managing the future. Turning on the high beams in your car and looking out ahead and seeing what's ahead around the corner, and you start developing strategies to meet that future, to manage that future. Some examples of looking ahead for you that's in that top of that building block is you're looking at police services and how best to provide police services, probably for the next generation or two. Looking at this community center and rebuilding this community center. Those are all strategic issues, high-risk issues. And so all 3 of those you have to be functioning pretty well at to be a good public agency. So what does a general manager do in all this? General manager makes sure that first building block is in place, but he doesn't do it. Somebody else does it. The next building block he spends more time in, and that's holding service providers accountable and making sure quality services are being provided. And the third building block, those high-risk issues, innovation for the future, he is in with both feet. That's what a general manager does. And so the goal of this project was go back to that base level and make sure that stuff is in place so Tony's not doing it, and so he can focus on the proper role of those other things, the board priorities. That in a nutshell is what we were doing. So back in November, part of phase 1, in interviewing folks, confirmed that general managers consumed with minutia. The job descriptions of our employees were either out of date or very informally developed. On occasions, employees themselves modified them. Typically what happens is they're done by a third party, and then typically it goes to the board to be approved. The district administrator was consumed with minutes, taking minutes, managing difficult payroll, and other clerical duties. not an effective use of the district administrator's time. And then there were some other roles that were probably not fulfilled as much as they should. A professional clerk of the board function, managing your assets in a professional way, managing your IT, your technology. That wasn't centralized. Solid waste, holding the vendor accountable. That's something that was being done by a board member and citizen volunteers. Being more proactive in your parks and recreation goals and public information and engagement was not being done as quality as I think the community wants. And then there was professional fiscal management and professional human resource support, where it's being done very ad hoc, and the general manager was bringing in consultants to help him with the finances, which was a very expensive way to deal with it. So in that November, I suggested three things, three initiatives. One is to develop new job descriptions, to memorialize responsibilities and duties and write job descriptions using human resource best practices to develop those job descriptions. And that's the purpose of today's meeting, is reporting out on the results of that. The other two are in process. One is doing a review of our human resource practices. That will come back ultimately to your board. And the third one is updating the policy manual, which is woefully out of date. So phase two. In our firm, we have a bunch of human resource consultants. HR consultant interviewed employees to understand their duties, how much time it's taking out of their day. He developed job descriptions using HR practices where you combine duties with similar skill sets needed to perform those duties. So a clerical person gets clerical duties. A higher paid person gets managerial duties. And so putting together like duties that require like skill sets. He also assigned those roles that were not being fulfilled that we talked about in phase one. He wrote job descriptions to provide some flexibility. Not every duty is listed, because if every duty was listed and every time there was a change requested by the general manager, you'd have to change the job description. You can't do that. So there is some flexibility there. Then I've performed a salary survey to kind of do an estimate of what I think it would take to fill these positions, and then provided employees the opportunity to read the report and provide comments. Some important comments in the front end. One is these recommended changes. It's a reflection of professionalizing the district. It's got nothing to do with employee performance. Employees were very helpful with this project, and I think the employees are doing the best they can given the resources and the constraints and the change in management that's occurred in the district. So the first change is in the police services specialist. Most of her responsibility is supporting the chief and the police department, records, evidence management, coordinating an extensive training program for sworn officers, tracking and reporting crime statistics, dealing with inquiries from via phone, email, or in person. She also did some administrative duties, scheduling a community center, collecting fees, scheduling maintenance staff for district facilities. The only change we're recommending is pulling away the general administrative support duties and giving it to somebody else. So this person is focused strictly on police responsibility, police support. The next position would be a new position, this district clerk of the board, very common in public agencies. The district clerk of the board provides professional support to the board, the committees, and the general manager. Ensures meetings are in conformance with state law, minutes are taken, published, facilities and AV equipment are adequate and ready, compiles agendas, ensures board action is followed up after you take action, and creates and manages a district central file system. This role, this clerk of the board role, has become very professionalized. There's an association called City Clerk Association in California. They actually have credentialing programs for their city clerks. So it's a profession now. And I think that's the kind of background that I think would serve you well. Right now, the clerk of the board duties are spread among different people. Part of the duties are done by the district administrator, part of them, unfortunately, are done by the board, and sometimes they're done by the general manager. We think a lot of that should be consolidated under one person. And one area that we are concerned about is your filing system. And that is probably not being managed as well as I think you should have. So the recommendations is to consolidate all these duties under one position, and if you contract out the minutes, which we think you should, then the workload of this position would probably be about 50%. The next position is the office assistant. It would be a new position that would assume the clerical duties handed over from the police services specialist and would assume some of the clerical duties from the district administrator position. And I think because of the compensation for office assistants is much less, that'll be a very cost-effective way for you to provide those kind of services. Our estimate is about 25 hours a week, or 63% of a position. The next is the district finance and business manager. I think that the district would benefit from a higher level expertise in the area of finance and operations of a public agency. Things like budget development and control. I saw the budget, the recent budget you adopted. I think that's huge improvement from what you had in the past. And with a position like this, you would have even more. The general manager did that on the side with some help with the consultant. So what I'm suggesting is cut out the consultant, put that responsibility with this position. Long-term fiscal forecasting, I think, is critical for the district, especially when you think about CalPERS and OPEB cost trends. Somebody needs to really understand the actuarial reports inside and out. Debt management. You've got this project here that is sorely needed. The question is do you finance that or try to pay cash? Somebody with some debt management skills, debt placement, et cetera, would be important. Information technology. There's all these different contracts, different vendors having pieces. That should be coordinated and consolidated under one person. And somebody that is very comfortable with accounting and payroll systems. You've got to convert that payroll system to probably a contracted model. It's just, for an agency your size, you just should not be doing payroll by yourself. Some of these duties are being done ad hoc by the general manager, consultants and volunteers. I think it should be done by this position, and I think it would be a good succession strategy. They might be the next general manager if you hired somebody part-time. It's going to reduce consulting costs. They'll supervise the office assistant. This frees up the general manager to do those higher level duties that we talked about. We think this position would be roughly 30 hours a week, maybe even less, once things stabilize. And then the district manager. There was discussion about the policies, the policy manual. It's just full of outdated stuff. There is no job description. There's no reference to a general manager. The parks manager, parks administrator, district secretary, we don't know of a classification called that. There's MOUs in there. There's just a ton of things that are just outdated, and as you know, you're updating those things. So we're creating a job description for the general manager. Up till now, the general manager's job description, unstated, was he does everything nobody else does, and we can't have that. So besides pursuing board priorities and representing the district with stakeholders and overseeing staff, this person will be responsible for asset management, solid waste oversight, All these things that I said were not being done as quality as we can. You get this when you free up his time from the minutia. And my math was off here. The thinking would be 2 to 3 days a week was the goal. We think you can get back to that if these recommendations are implemented. So setting compensation and estimating costs. And it's essentially salary and very nominal state and federal mandated benefits. I surveyed neighboring cities and special districts. I listed them out here: Albany, El Cerrito, Emeryville, Orinda, Moraga, San Pablo, San Ramon Fire District, Central Contra Costa County Sanitation District. And what we came up with was a suggestion that the clerk of the board, we should offer $40 per hour. That was the average of the survey. Office assistant, 23. District finance and business manager, $62 an hour. Now, clerk of the board, what I used is deputy city clerks, because I don't think you should compare this clerk of the board to Emeryville. But some of them have deputies, and that deputy would be more comparable to responsibility here. Or executive assistants, be a similar skill set. Office assistant, everybody has an office assistant, so that was real easy to survey. District finance and business manager, you can't afford a CFO. They make as much as the general manager, if not more. So I compared it to accounting supervisors, controllers, or management analysts. That's what I compared to. And we came up with $62 as the average. So the total cost of the new positions would be $180,200, but they're offset by savings. And I stole this from the general manager's staff report, so he can speak to these numbers. The savings, the offsets, would be the elimination of the district administrator, reduction of the police specialist hours, reduction of finance consultants, reduction of various other consultants, and savings of $170,000. So the marginal cost is an increase of $10,000. That's I think a good investment for the quality you're going to get with district operations. So with that, I'll be happy to answer your questions.
All right, any board members' questions? Okay. Sylvia?
Yeah, I actually had a few questions. Just give me one moment.
I have a quick one. Why did you consider putting minute-taking with the office assistant? Or do you think that that is a separate skill set?
That could be an option.
Okay.
I think there are people that specialize in that type of activity.
Okay.
And I think you could contract that out, and I think it could be very, very efficient for you.
At what kind of rate?
That would be the question. General Manager, do you recall the rate when you've used it? I thought it was in the 20s per hour.
It was generally in the 20s per hour, but there are people that do it in the 30s that are provide a little higher level of product.
So what I would suggest is the general manager go out and take some informal proposals and evaluate whether or not the office assistant candidate that we acquired has the time and the skill sets and would do it cheaper. That could be an option.
The office assistant, is that the person responsible for letting people in the door, answering the phones?
Yes.
So what are our hours now for the office? Well, officially.
Well, I believe the district administrator has 30 hours a week.
Right. So would this replace that person, that function, as far as manning the door, essentially?
I think it would be teamwork between the office assistant the clerk of the board, whoever's around. But I think by sharing it, I think you'll have a better performance at the front door, if you will.
I think that would, up to the general manager to manage and determine what coverage he so chose.
And I wanted to add to that, it really is up to the board. There is very light traffic from the public, is my observation. But when people show up, they do want immediate help. So and I would understand that. It is possible that it could be split among several positions and have so someone is present at all times. It doesn't have to be one person.
I have a few questions. I wanted to ask about, under the district clerk of the board, I would like to just note that on page 5 and 6 of, I believe, the November report, you made reference to sometimes there's not follow-up or there's confusion over board action or direction, and that, I believe, is a very important part of the clerk of the board's responsibilities, because that does happen. Things get decided, but then there's no clear action step as to who's responsible for taking the next step sometimes. So I just wanted to, I would personally recommend that, a particular specific bullet point would be added to this that would say something like, responsible for tracking board direction and decisions and ensuring that all necessary follow-up actions occur. It doesn't mean that the clerk of the board does the action. In some cases, the clerk of the board would, but in other cases, it just means that there's, a clear sense of who is doing what immediately following a decision. And the language is pretty much from pages 5 and 6 from the November 6th report. I also noted that under the general manager's job description, I think it's the 4th bullet point down, or maybe 5th, talks about supervising the fleet and the information systems. I just note that the police chief also has some responsibilities in this regard. Currently, the fleet is the police fleet, so that would be kind of done through the police chief. And the information systems, there is an important one that the chief has responsibility for, and then, of course, all others would rest with the general manager. And lastly, as long as we are directly managing our own police force, I think it's an important point, which is really different from other districts, and the kind of experience we need in a general manager is someone having overseen a public safety agency, in particular police, but because most district managers don't have that experience, city managers do. So those are just my comments, and I just wanted to make note of them.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, I'm all for not getting lost in minutia, so I'd like to go for a big picture issue. Is this, there is some understanding on the part of some in the community that this is an attempt to get rid of people who are currently employed and replace them with other employees. Are you proposing that, or are you proposing restructuring with positions that might accommodate them?
It's more like the later. I don't participate in projects that are designed to get rid of people. I just don't participate in that kind of game. What I do participate in is making public agencies more effective, more cost-effective, providing higher performance, and they're more accountable to their residents. So this is about making the district better, and using my professional input as well as people from my firm, and putting together the duties that I think best meet the needs of Kensington. One of the things that has been instilled in me by my mentors many, many years ago, and I'll cough up to almost 50% of that 75 figure that General Manager mentioned, is it's about the people, and it's about the business, it's about the profession, it's about standards. And if you start playing games with the organization, either modify them to get rid of people or the opposite of that, designing it around to keep people based on personality. Those are the hallmarks for the organizations that come and ask for me to help them out. They ultimately get into trouble. So it was the later of those two options.
Okay, the latter. But to be specific, would it be possible for current employees to apply for these
Absolutely.
positions?
Absolutely. In fact,
Or qualify, I should say qualify for these new positions.
I can't speak to qualifications because I don't have that, I haven't done that work. I can't speak to their qualifications, but our recommendation would be for them to apply, absolutely.
Well, you have some sense of what they're already doing, so that should give you some sense of what their qualifications are, right? So, am I understanding that?
Well, not really, because I didn't review their performance reviews. I don't have any feel for how well they're doing.
No, I'm not asking about that. I'm just asking about the qualifications for the work.
Well, qualifications is a function of they've done it, and they've done it well, and I can't speak to the second part.
Yeah.
Okay, another question. You mentioned credentialing for the COB position.
Uh-huh.
Is that something you would recommend an applicant to have, or would that not be critical?
I think it would be nice to have, I think because it's a part-time position, it's a small district, your pool of applicants is going to shrink because there's no benefits. And so I would encourage you to find somebody, but if you have somebody that has the skill sets, just didn't get the credential, I would say go for it. I wouldn't require it because then you might cut some people off. You might lose an opportunity.
One other thing. So in your vision of how the GM and the police chief would operate under this new structure, historically there has been a lot of interaction between the police chief / GM and the public. People call up a lot with issues. People ask for meetings with issues. And I don't actually know how that's been going during the past year, but do you see a significant portion of their duties involving that kind of direct interaction with the public?
Which position?
Well, both. See, it used to be a combined position, and so now there's a GM and there's a police chief, and people still have questions they want to bring to somebody at the top of one of the two to get resolved. And do you see that kind of interaction being a significant part of the GM, for example, or the GM and the police chief, depending on the nature of the question?
I think it's the second approach. I think the general manager should be expected to interact with the public. The police chief should be expected to interact with the public. The benefit of having a generalist general manager is that you've got more capacity for the district to do just that, to interact with the public. And then if somebody has an issue with the police department, they have one extra level to talk to. And so I think they both should be doing a lot of outreach.
Okay, I guess what I was getting at, this is designed for and I'm sorry to go on and on about this, but it's designed for the unique characteristics of this community. And the way I see the unique characteristics of this community is that the citizens expect a lot of interaction with the top brass, and more so perhaps than others that are more institutionalized and put layers in between the individual citizen and the person perceived as making the decisions.
And you've got a veteran general manager that is very comfortable with distributing that responsibility and sharing that responsibility versus getting a new city manager, new general manager who wants to control everything and create that scenario you described. So I think you've got your cake and eat it too. You've got capacity to really reach out and interact.
Just want to say thank you. I think the report's excellent. I think you've done a wonderful job, and it's very helpful.
Can I also respond to Director Welch's questions also? That I think that several employees are impacted either directly or indirectly, and we want to be sensitive to the employees. and work with the employees in this process. Change is very difficult in organizations. This is not an organization that has experienced much change, and certainly not dramatic change. And we want to work with everybody on that. I was reviewing the job descriptions, as you were asking, Mr. Dyson. They're broadly written. They offer substitutions. For example, on the clerk position, it does indicate to have a certified municipal clerk designation, and it gives another path to qualifying. So there's several paths to qualifying. There isn't one specific only requirement. And I think that a number of people would qualify, including the possibility of current employees also. I don't know, I don't know everyone's background offhand, but they're written very broadly, and I'm used to working in that situation. And on city clerk, I've had a number of city clerks that have worked for me. Most of them have not had that certificate when they started. They gained it later by training and by going to various sessions. So it's not uncommon not to have it and get it later.
Thank you, Bob. Okay. You're going to stay. We will take public comment. First, I wanted to take a quick show of hands to see how many people were hoping to speak. All right. All right. Thank you. We'll just ask you to keep your comments to the time limit, and also please to just come up once. And comments should be addressed to the board and to the general manager. So please go ahead and begin and introduce yourselves.
Good evening, board. My name is Ted Wolter. I work for the law firm of Vuitton Jones. We represent Mrs. Lynn Wolter in this regard. We are a law firm out of Sacramento. I have 3 points that I would like to raise this evening. First, Director Deppie, I know that the directors and Mr. Constantoros received my letter of yesterday. We believe that you should be recused from voting on this matter. Our client on March 25th reported an improper incident, the improper removal of petitions related to a 2009 ballot initiative in this community. Those petitions should have been destroyed, and instead on March 25th they were improperly removed from the district offices and taken to your home. Mrs. Wolter reported this to Mr. Constantoros, and since doing so has been retaliated against repeatedly for having reported this unlawful conduct, a report that is protected by California Labor Code Section 1102.5. Secondly, this action tonight would constitute an amendment of the district's budget ordinance, which was adopted in June. When public agencies adopt a budget, they adopt an ordinance that establishes the budget. This would amend the budget. There is no notice of any budget ordinance amendment. There is no notice that this is the first reading, let alone a second reading. You would need to have a first and second reading of an ordinance to amend the budget. This vote tonight would be ineffective because there is no ordinance before the board, and it is improper procedurally to move forward with this, and you would need to renotice this properly as a budget ordinance amendment as a first reading and follow up with a second reading at a subsequent meeting. Thirdly, the policy and procedure manual is also affected by this action. I disagree completely with your counsel that the district secretary is just part and parcel to the district manager. It is a separate position completely in the district policy and procedure manual. You cannot delete that position and replace it with 3 new ones without amending the policy and procedure manual first. It doesn't matter if you have in the past made errors in implementing and enforcing the policy and procedure manual. You cannot do it here when it's being pointed out to you. You cannot do it when you haven't noticed the public that you're going to amend the policy and procedure manual, and you cannot do it in one meeting. You have to have 2 readings of the amendment to the policy and procedure manual. Further, to amend the policy and procedure manual, you must pass it by a 4/5 vote of the board of directors. You cannot pass it by simple majority. It is a 4/5 vote measure. And lastly, just more of an editorial comment. I spent 12 years working for a public agency in Sacramento, a local government, a large local government, but a local government nonetheless. And all of these practices, all these procedures are very familiar to me. Local budgeting in particular and staffing is something that I have a bit of expertise in. And I find it shocking this evening that you are proposing to first change all the positions and upend things, and then maybe you should come back and conduct a human resources review second. I would suggest that the first thing you should do is conduct your human resources review, because you will find that despite what Mr. Constantoro said, that you lack a foundation here, you have a fantastic foundation in your organization. It's in Mrs. Wolter, it's in Andrea back there, and it's your 6 line officers that serve on the streets in this community. That's your foundation. Your problem is at the top of the organization, and a human resources review will reveal that and tell you how to properly address the issues that you're facing. And that's the end of my comments this evening, so thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity for public comment.
Thank you. Ann Danforth, would you simply address the matter of Mr. Deppie's discussing this issue and voting this evening?
Of course, the retaliation claim has been brought up before several times, not merely in connection with this matter. These structural changes have been under discussion now for about a year, well before the March 25th incident that Mr. Walter referred to. I don't see any facts that would lay a basis for retaliation here. Mr. Deppie has no particular reason to retaliate. He has not himself faced any ill consequences for the admitted mistakes of what happened. I would remind the audience that those mistakes arise from the failure to destroy the petitions. That was not Mr. Deppie's mistake, nor was it anybody currently sitting on the board or currently on staff, I believe. So again, I think it's a non-issue. I do understand that it's a matter of concern to the people directly involved, but it doesn't require Mr. Deppie to recuse himself.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead.
Ms. Danforth made a comment that I was going to ask. I was going to ask, why weren't those petitions destroyed earlier? And the district administrator was on the job at that point. But I do want to point out that Ms. Walter was on the committee to hire Mr. Harmon, and she later on got hired for that position, and after a while, she was giving an exceedingly generous raise, and that raise was given without much notification, if any, to the community. The community was very surprised at this sudden, very generous pay scale. But if Lynn, I have no reason to judge Lynn's qualifications. She's always been very pleasant to me. If she meets the qualifications, I would suspect she would be hired because she does have a lot of background experience. It's just as I say with the police. If they were qualified, other districts would hire them. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mabry Benson here.
Thank you. You will, of course, understand that the board will have no comment on individual employee performance. That is not up for discussion tonight. We're talking about organizational structure.
Vita Doro. I have a question. I have a question about the practicality of this Taj Mahaling. Where are we going to put these 5 people in the little office that we have? So I'd like to know that. And secondly, your consultant said that in phase 1, transparency is very important. My recollection is that about 2 or 3 meetings ago, and I believe it's on the tape, upon asking a question about transparency, Tony said, upon asking about the missing minutes, Tony said that minutes didn't have to do anything with transparency. So I'd like to know what is the definition of transparency that this board is going to be adhering to. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to comment, it will be a squeeze with the 5 people, but actually we have 5 individuals currently working for the board. So it's actually not an addition of any person number. So, thank you.
Next.
I get 5 from, currently we have financial advisor Bill Zanoni, we have general manager Constantoros, we have Deborah Russell, we have the district administrator Lynn Wolter. No, they do not have offices, but they rotate through the offices, small spaces that we have. So,
right. Please proceed.
Yes,
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, honorable board members. Maybe it's too loud. My name is Andrew Reed, and I'm a resident of Coventry Road. I'd like to take the discussion back to one of a financial nature. I understand that organizations are smart to review their structure and to get professional opinions. But I'd like to talk about how over a year ago, the board approved increased expenditures to go from one combined chief of police and general manager to 1.5 people to do the job. And at that time, there was an addition of about $100,000 to the budget per year for the half-time general manager. Now we have a request to nearly double the support staff for this same general manager and pay for outsourcing of several key functions. I think the $180,000 number probably does not include the outsourcing numbers, if I read it correctly. Whereas some of the ideas in the proposed reorganization may have merit, my concern is the timing and the increased expense of any such efforts. Community safety is the highest priority, and you have yet to refill all police officer positions. Voters were asked to approve a tax to fund the 10th position, and they did. You are obligated to fulfill this promise made to the citizens. Now your consultant, Matrix, I don't know that they're here tonight, has set forth recommendations that would suggest we actually need more officers, 2 per shift. So this should be our top spending priority, safety for the community. We also have the pension funding concerns mentioned so many times and so eloquently by previous speakers. That there is a plan to spend reserve funds to pay for the remodel of this youth hut that was mentioned earlier today. These seem like greater priorities to fund than creating an ideal staffing support situation for the new general manager. For decades, we have managed well enough, perhaps, with one person managing police, park, and garbage. We are not a large city, and we should not build in lasting, higher overhead given our size, our financial condition, and our goals. Your own recruiting language for the general manager position that was used a year ago said as follows: the ideal candidate will be comfortable rolling up their sleeves and doing the detailed analysis and sometimes mundane work given the limited staffing of the district. That's from your own materials. So now, let's not waver from this practicality and submit to the self-maximizing nature of bureaucracy. Please reject this proposal for increased staff and related expenditures until after we fully fund the police and make the improvements suggested by Matrix. Anything else belies the lack of strategy and fiscal discipline. This proposal is clearly a would-like and not a must-have, despite what you've heard from your consultant this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gail Feldman. Again, I wanted to recognize the work that Bob has done and also the work that Tony has done in looking at some of the needs of the district. I wanted to also clarify that going back in time, this issue has been around for over a year now. When Tony came and spoke to KPOA last fall, he did say that one of the first things in stepping into his role was that he did discover that there were some issues with the administration of the district that had to be addressed. So I was not surprised then for the follow-up, which was to bring Bob on to look at a reorganization or look at what was going on in the district as far as the administrative services that were being provided. So none of this was a surprise, but I am a bit surprised by some of the scope of what's been found, or at least what's being recommended. And I am concerned, as the previous speaker just mentioned, Andrew, that perhaps this is kind of a sort of a dream of what could happen, but perhaps it's a little more than what a small district like Kensington can really afford or even need to support, because we're not a full-service district even. We have one police department and we contract out recreation services. So I have concerns about the size and scope of what's being proposed. I don't necessarily need to get into all the minutia of some of the things that I saw in the job descriptions, but there were a few things that stood out, and perhaps I'll just raise those, and then if you're interested, you can further query Tony and Bob about it. One is the issue about the COB, the clerk of the board function. In all the organizations I've worked in where it was a county or a city, the clerk of the board was an administrative arm of the city manager or the county administrator. And so it's really the role of the county administrator, the district manager, or whoever, to be responsible for implementing the decisions of the board and making sure that they're followed up on. So I didn't really see that role going to the clerk of the boards where I've worked. And so I think that needs to be clarified a little further, what really the role of the general manager would be in those cases. There's filing of paperwork that would be a responsibility of a clerk, but not necessarily ensuring that the actual actions that need to be taken, those seem to me to be the general manager's responsibility. Other things, such as the office assistant, do seem to be would be nice to have somebody there to greet people who come in, but as Tony has mentioned, you don't have a lot of traffic coming in and out. Typically, when I've gone to the office, there's always either a police officer in the building who can, accept mail or documents. So I think there are other ways to handle that, which wouldn't be as costly as having a separate position to be there. And as far as the business and finance manager, I do think it's really important that whether it's a function of the general manager or another position, that you have a strong person who can handle your budget and your financial management. Right now it's been bifurcated, as it was mentioned. I support having that in one person if possible, and I also think that it does make sense for some of the functions like payroll to be done under contract. And so I think that's a good combination, and looking at the role and responsibility of that position further seems like a good idea. But again, it's an expensive position, and so I think there has to be some savings somewhere else. And so I would ask you to request a further breakdown of some of the costs that were listed as far as the savings and what the costs are for the positions, as well as the other contracts that you guys will need, and including the contract that's up on your agenda for tonight for the payroll services and financial management, as well as that you'll need consultants for other things, whether it's your human resources management or other activities that you're always needing. And so I think that the dollars really aren't quite correct in what we saw in the report tonight. Just one other thing is that I would have liked to have seen some comparisons to some other smaller districts. Marinwood across the bay in Marin County is a very similar district to Kensington, and when I looked at their administrative staffing, they have a very small administrative staffing. They have a general manager and an administrative assistant. They probably don't have the same issues currently that Kensington has, so I'm not saying that we're exactly like them, but I think we need to understand why they can do it with such a small staff, whereas Kensington needs to have, many more staff, 5 people, to do the same kind of size district. So those are just some of my comments, and I'd be happy to write to you more, not take up all your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Liddell. I'd like to ask the board to please reconsider the proposed plan to replace our district administrator with 3 other full or part-time employees. We cannot afford the additional expense, especially when we've recently spent so much on the Matrix Group to find out that the citizens of Kensington really like their police department, and for this study, which recommends a bloated, expensive staff to handle a job that's been done for many years by a single person. If in fact the district administrator is overloaded, can we not transfer some of the work to a knowledgeable volunteer? In the past, the board has reached out to its citizens to help with the administration of the district. The Finance Committee has been an integral part of our budget planning for many years. Other official and not-so-official groups have formed and dissolved as needed to assist the board with planning and problem-solving. Where is the marketplace of ideas that gave us the ad hoc report, built the community center, and provided support to the board on a variety of issues over the years? Why are we again spending money we haven't got on consultants and lawyers instead of reaching out to the community? Why do you want to discard years of knowledge and experience so we can look like a large municipality and bankrupt ourselves doing it? Does the work outlined in the D's report have to be allocated in the manner described? Could there not be some tasks that volunteers could take on? I suspect that our residents would rather have a fully staffed police department than a district administration that makes a nice article in some consulting industry magazine, but benefits us little. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could please approach the podium a little faster. Sorry, not to.
Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me now? Okay, this is as loud as it gets. Kevin Fitzsimmons. I'm actually going to go off my script for just a second and reiterate something that Len said, if I may call you Len. Kensington does have a unique character, and I think it was Mr. Brady at Matrix brought it up. And he compared us to small New England towns. And I think with a place as small as Kensington, what we really depend on for our character are our neighbors. We certainly can't depend on the size of our bridges or the glamour of our theater districts, the prestige of our sports teams. I mean, even our Tilden Park, we share mostly with Oakland. We really depend on the lives and the personality and the contribution of our neighbors. And to kind of paraphrase Cain's immortal question, who are my neighbors? Well, sometimes the neighbors are people we like and agree with. Sometimes they're people we respect and disagree with. And other times they're just people we have no use for at all. And I should also mention with the character of Kensington, property values are very important. I have read the documents in relation to number 8 in the agenda, and I'm not impressed that the recommendations help the city of Kensington, help the character of Kensington, or foster any sense of neighbor. What is being proposed here, I believe can be perceived, and I'm hearing it is being perceived, is a proposal under the guise of efficiency and economy, which is really nothing more than a shameful attempt to get rid of an employee while cutting the salaries of other employees. These recommendations don't seem to improve efficiency, they don't seem to save us money, and to be honest, they don't seem to be written for Kensington as we are today. For all the trees that have been killed writing these reports, there's shocking little detail on financial aspects of this deal. I suspect that might be because they all depend on contracts that do not now exist and may never exist. In addition, the oh-so-delicate recommendation that the current district administrator reapply to one of these possibly part-time positions smacks soundly of trying to get rid of somebody. The question is, though, out of all the people you could get rid of, why would you want to get rid of someone who has faithfully served this community for years in different capacities? A neighbor who worked to get us that park on the hill over there. A neighbor who is respected by many people in this town, not because we always agree with her, but because she knows the history of Kensington, is part of the history of Kensington, and she understands the facts and the figures and will tell you them even if it's inconvenient. I'll leave out the part where I compare you to Ray Cohn. The perception that is going to cling to a yes vote on this decision tonight, on this job description thing, is that the board did not do what was best for Kensington. The perception that this community is going to be left with is that there was a yes vote on a concocted set of recommendations and staffing changes to either get rid of somebody who was inconvenient, feed somebody's ego, or cover something up. I urge you not to take action that will push qualified public servants away from the job and, in the words of the Management Strategy Group's own analysis, who will probably be replaced with part-time people or retirees, inexperienced people. It seems to me we are trading in good to chase after bad, going down a path of fiscal irresponsibility, and quite frankly, being cruel. Thank you.
My name is Hoda Perry. I have lived in Kensington for almost 50 years. You forgive me if first of all, I don't have notes, but I think I need to point out something to the manager, general manager, and to the board. I think some of you have lived here a certain number of years. But I think you are misunderstanding the nature of this community and who we are. We are not a high-powered, large city. We don't need 5 part-timers and a this and a that to function. We need our police force. We need our neighbors. We need people we can talk to at the police station. We need a full complement of police officers. Frankly, some of us think that's a lot more important than having a general manager. I think you need to start listening to this community. Please, don't underestimate us. I was here, as were a lot of other people, after Proposition 13 was passed, and the community galvanized itself. We went from door to door. We had coffee clutches, we had teas, we had meetings in people's homes, and we taxed ourselves to keep our police force. We are willing to do all kinds of things to make sure that the board is answerable to what we, the people who elect you, want. Thank you.
Corey Deng. The board and its consultant groups like to throw around the term like transparency. My favorite terms thrown around by a board member was make Kensington boring again. I'm hoping that was meant to be a pun based on Trump's slogan. What we didn't know, but somewhat as expected, is that the board wasn't just using the slogan, they were employing Trump's tactics. One of the first rules of Trump's playbook is to get rid of people and things that inconvenience you and bring in lackey to back it up. We have seen this with the ridiculous and scientific method employed by Matrix. I guess backing up confirmation bias after majority board doesn't come cheap. We see it by the board ignoring public in terms of appointments, refusing to abide by the rules of normal hiring and vetting of employees, to our own little scandal investigation. What's next? Ignoring the right to vote? One trick taken by Trump playbook is to get rid of people who didn't fit in. One way is to get rid of people is to restructure position and push people out. I hate this thing. What is happening here with this recommendation? The recommendation are designed to push Lynn Walter out of her job and place her with part-time employees who can be pushed around to not raise question or to have opinion. Instead of supporting a good employee and a person who has served Kensington for many years, the board is going to make the decision to kick her out, add more people, and cost us more money. Why are taxpayer being treated like your second mortgage? Say what you want, but the real reason for this recommendation are obvious. Thanks for bringing a little of Washington to Kensington. If the goal was to make Kensington boring, you fail. The policy on this board and the treatment of district employee and police officer on boring, they're downright deplorable. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Gretchen Gilfillan.
I've lived in Kensington 60 years, and I'm here to speak on behalf of my good friend, Lynn Walter, who's smart, 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 and she could fill any job, any job that is available. And we would be totally remiss in losing her. Please listen to me.
Hello, I'm Carl Kruger. It'd be my luck to follow someone who's lived here 60 years. See, my 3 decades don't mean much at that point. However, I've been coming to these meetings for a very long time, long before any of you were on the board or came to the meetings. I'm not sure about Chris. No, he may have come often enough, so I don't know if I have seniority on him. But I can't say that in all this time that we ran a tight police department, because we did not. We had all kinds of hiccups that should not have happened. And if I go back a little bit, when we had Greg Harmon, he obviously was not a manager. He was a police officer. He acted like it. He did not act like a manager. We then decided to hire Kevin Hart. Now, I like Kevin Hart a lot. He was very professional. He dressed professionally, he acted professionally, he answered professionally. And I was sorry that the board did not make it with him. And then we hired Tony. I also love Tony because he has experience, he's a very mild-mannered person. I remember the night he was introduced in this building. Anthony asked him, do you have the authority to make personnel decisions? And Tony kind of said, yes, and in a very mild-mannered way. He should have said, hell yes. Why would I have taken a job like this if I do not have the right to hire and fire? Because this is not the board's job. It's a general manager's job. So anyway, where am I going? You authorized money for consultants last fiscal year. Tony hired consultants. And I assume that he hired the best consultants that he could get. They gave us 2 community meetings where people had a lot of opportunity to ask questions. They gave us a report in May with some general recommendations that, as far as I can see, have not been acted upon. And then they came out with a report in August. And the way I feel is we hired the best consultants, we paid for them. Why would we not listen to them? Now, I happen to believe in a strong management structure. And the way I see the lineup, the way it is, that gives us an opportunity to have a good, solid police department. Now, the way all of this came about with the July meeting not happening and then this thing happening, I think that this board needs to schedule a community meeting where people have an opportunity to express themselves. And it's my hope that the community will see the benefits of this structure and will go this way. I have some questions about the cost, this $180,000, and that the savings kind of sort of disappear. And, you know, so I have a hard time believe that we find $170,000 in savings. So clearly, this has to fit into our schedule, but that's the general manager's job to see that it fits into the schedule. So I thought I'd give you a change of pace and what's been said, and I always have a way of making friends within the audience, and I did it again tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Keith Barrow, Police Officers Association, and I'd like to give my time over to Mr. Walter, because I'd like to hear some of his responses on some of the things that your council had raised. He's not a repeat. It's my 5 minutes.
No, we're not doing time exchange, I'm sorry. We're asking each group, each person to
Show me
speak
what
once.
policy that's under,
No, well, we can call the
or is
question.
that your rule?
That's, we
Is that
asked,
under your rule, or
we
is it-
set that up previously that we'd ask each person to only speak once, that it was not a question and answer.
So I don't have 5 minutes?
If you would like to speak for 5 minutes, I'm happy to allow you to
I
speak.
stand here next to him and let him speak?
No, we're not going to, I presented that, I asked everyone, please to just speak once so that we could allow everyone in the audience and not call the question because we have other business. So if you would like to speak, I'm more than happy to hear from you.
Okay. Well, I know the officers are against this. You're going to bring in 5 people to sit in one chair. We don't have the room in the department. We don't have the computer structure to handle that. There's a lot of other questions that are going to be brought up very soon, and I'll give over to somebody else.
Thank you very much.
I'm short, so I'm going to have to lower this. So, good evening, board. How y'all doing? Ted Foley, police officer here at Kensington Police Department. General Manager, Tony. Bob Dice. Before I start, this is a statement from the Police Officers Association that I'm making. I was voted to basically make the statement on their behalf. I want to start out by saying this is not an attack on the board or Tony or Bob Dice. I know your history. You're a smart guy. Don't know much about Tony other than what I've heard from him, and obviously I know the board extremely well. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to say that we have grave concerns about what's come up here. In our opinion, you're eliminating Lynn's position. You should, everybody here should understand that Lynn and Andrea Denopoli are the fabric that makes the department run the way it does. Without those two, we could not function the way we do. We're at half staff. We don't have to worry about our payroll. We don't have to worry about a number of things. If I have a question, I can go to Lynn. If I need something done, I can go to Andrea. These are the people that keep us in line. These are the people that keep us post-compliant, which is something that I'm sure Mr. Bob Dice doesn't know anything about. Post-compliance, POBAR violations, things of that nature. This is what they do. This is what keeps the district from being sued. It's very important that you, the board, hear that. It's what keeps the district from being sued, okay? If we're gonna go to job descriptions, let me just read off Lynn's real quick. And this is just some of the things she does. Lynn does payroll, accounts payable, minutes, website, human resources, occasional emergency phone or lobby, audit field work, assist GM, assist board, maintain files, adhere to records retention ordinance, assist with election materials, be knowledgeable about CalPERS, which, by the way, is extremely important because if there's a PERS mistake, the fine that comes is massive. And it could break this board. Matter of fact, I believe they're about to get a $70,000 fine from CalPERS as we speak. Reports and compliance, answer questions or park, tree ordinance, garbage service and contract, history of district, and basically county responsibilities, etc. Okay? Here's Andrea's. Property, evidence manager, training manager, records, SDRMA, CSDA training, police department, statistics monthly liaison coordinator with maintenance personnel, Bill Driscoll, and landscaper Fernando Herrera, special projects assigned, accounts receivable, office manager, community center coordinator, rentals, and renew contracts for regular groups. These are just some of the things that they do. What you should know about Andrea and Lynn, and something that the consultant didn't talk about, if you want to hire new employees and you want them in our police department beyond the lobby, they have to go through a full background. That takes 3 to 6 months. If you allow those people into any of our offices where our screens are up, or next to our police reports that has victims' identifiable information, we're in violation of post, and the state will come in and mandate oversight over your police department. That's not something that you want. Because the days of me closing your garage door, putting away the awning for you, things of that we do outside of our normal police duties, they will tell us that we can't do it because it's a violation. This is a unique community, and I appreciate Bob Dice and his experience. I've actually kind of looked him up. He actually did a lot of hard work in Stockton. But again, we've experienced where people come in here and they say, Kensington, it's small. No problem, I've got it. They don't understand how unique this community is. So when you get big city ideas coming to a small district, this is where you end up with big problems. This is a very unique community. I love it, that's why I'm still here. I don't even have to go to the big city agencies, believe me, they're knocking down my door. Palo Alto PD, where I can make over $200,000 a year. San Mateo County, I can make over $200,000 a year. And I don't like tooting my own horn, but believe me, there's no agency that would refuse me. BART Police Department, which is right here, $150,000 a year. They are bugging me constantly. The recruiter, I know him, and he won't stop bugging me. It's not about the money for me. It's you, the community. I love you. I love this community. I even like those of you who challenge us and question why we do what we do. I embrace that. I know I've turned some of you around from being haters of the police department or complain about the way we do services just by having a conversation with you and asking you, how can I make things better for you? These are things that I see Lynn do all the time when people walk in. Andrea does it all the time over the phone. They talk to residents, they listen to residents. So again, going back to job descriptions. My job description as police officer, we don't have enough time for me to tell you everything I do as a police officer, and that's my real job description. I throw out the trash at the police department because it saves the district money. I shred paperwork, I put away boxes, I do everything in that agency. We all do, because it saves you money. I don't go around saying, hey, you know what we need, guys? We need a janitor, and we should pay him $40,000 a year. No, we don't. We can save that money, because we'll do it. Because we love this community, and we want to keep our police department here. We want to serve you. That's our main function. So, when you hear job descriptions like, you know, what Bob Dice was saying about Tony, job descriptions to me have always meant you don't want to do the extra work. And again, I'm not saying that's what Tony wants. I'm just saying that's what I've seen. That's been my experience, okay? So you'll never hear that I have a job description. My job description is to do what needs to be done. Our chief does it. He expects it from us, and you, the community, expect it from us, and we try to deliver as best we can. Okay? Now, the next thing I'm going to read is actually not from us. Oh, by the way, before I go into this.
I'm sorry, you have a 5-minute limit if you can.
Okay, sure. I'll just show you. This is actually from an attorney representing Andrea, but I'd like to say that before you go running to my chief and yelling at him, blaming him for this, he has not endorsed this little statement. He has nothing to do with it, okay? But he can't stop it. So just so you know, don't go blaming our chief, okay? You can put it on us, the Police Officers Association. So this is from Andrea's attorney, and it says, Dear board members, I represent Ms. Andrea DiNapoli in connection with recent developments at her place of employment. The facts, as I and Ms. DiNapoli understand them, are as follows. Ms. DiNapoli is tasked in part with security and keeping track of evidence used in criminal cases, making sure the district's peace officers are up to date on the required post-training. She is also responsible for a host of peace officer and non-peace officer related tasks, such as running the schedule for the community center. At times, she fills in for others who are out, and in an effort to make sure payroll is administered smoothly and interactions with the public remain seamless. Today, the board is apparently deciding whether to decrease Ms. DiNapoli's pay by $10,000. This is being done without any prior notice given to Ms. DiNapoli personally. She found out about this by way of reviewing the attachment relating to item 7A of the agenda for the open meeting being held tonight. Ms. DiNapoli urges the district not to decrease her salary for a variety of reasons. A decrease in salary makes little fiscal sense given the important work Ms. DiNapoli does, as indicated above, as well as the lack of increase in Ms. DiNapoli's salary over the past 10 years and the district spending in other areas. Hold on, I got to use my young man eyes here. Earlier this year, a CPI increase for Ms. DiNapoli and District Administrator Lynn Walter was budgeted by the district, yet the district has never actually implemented that increase. The board recently paid approximately $25,000 in non-budgeted monies for a proposed administrative support reorganization report by Bob Dice. During the investigation that led to the creation of the report, Don Turco, a consultant with Public Management Group, sat with Ms. DiNapoli for approximately an hour to review her job duties and salary. When he discovered that Ms. DiNapoli had not received a raise during the 10 years she worked for the district, He indicated that he would document that Ms. DiNapoli had not received a raise, that her pay should be adjusted to reflect her job duties, titles, and that he would pass the information to Bob Dice. The resulting report was dubbed the Bob Dice Report, which was issued on July 11, 2018. This is what the report said regarding Ms. DiNapoli's position. We are recommending that the general administrative support duties currently provided by this position, i.e. scheduling use of the community center, collecting fees, and working with maintenance staff for the district facilities, should be reassigned to other district staff. This position may provide basic reception duties in coordination with the office assistant position described below. We believe the staffing level of this position can be reduced by approximately 20% when transferring the general administrative support duties to the new office assistant. We were not asked to review the salary for this position. Curiously, the DICE report was apparently not concerned with reviewing Ms. DiNapoli's salary. The district also spent $75,000 in non-budgeted money to examine the contracting out of police services. The resulting report was dubbed the Matrix Report. Contracting out the service would apparently cost the district anywhere from an estimated $14 to $26 million in payments to CalPERS. Tonight, the board is voting on whether to hire an office assistant and pay that person approximately $30,000 per year, by the way, the same salary Ms. DiNapoli is currently making, assigning her some of Ms. DiNapoli's non-peace officer-related tasks. In the past, Ms. DiNapoli has expressed to the board concerns of the type that provide her legal protection and retaliation, especially in light of the district's apparent spending on other matters as touched above. It is hard for Ms. DiNapoli to view a reduction in her salary or anything other than retaliation for her speaking out. Thank you for your attention on this matter. Signed, Curtis Allen, her attorney. Let me just say one more thing, and with all due respect. I appreciate the board, I appreciate this community, and I can tell you right now that since Lynn has been gone, there's already an FLSA violation that I'm experiencing. And as of Wednesday, when I get paid, the district, if I filed a complaint, would owe me $6,000 because Lynn's not there. $6,000. Not to mention the fact that if you eliminate her position and you try to do this to Andrea, I guarantee you they're going to have their attorneys come sue you. More litigation. All I've heard the district talk about is how they want to reduce litigation. I want to reduce litigation. I don't want to see us liable for anything. I don't want to lose this community. I don't want to lose this agency. So please, just take consideration of my words. Thank you for your time.
I'll just state that, unfortunately, there are several inaccuracies that the board would find with Mr. Allen's assertions, but we'll not address those directly. Go ahead.
Celia Conkus. I have lived here more than 50 years, so not the only one in the room. Yes. I just wanted to say that there seems to be nobody here who is acknowledging that the report that Mr. Dice did and what this board is doing is trying to find a better way to improve the delivery of police services. That's all that is happening. This board inherited many problems, and people are afraid to mention that these problems exist. There have been unauthorized CLETS investigations that never should have happened. There have been citizens in this community who have been threatened, intimidated for speaking out at meetings because they said things that were not complimentary to the police department. I happen to be one of them. The evidence room in the public safety building was an absolute mess, and I heard that from Interim Chief Hart. He's the one who talked about it. There were things that were disappearing from the evidence room, and it was not secure. Okay? One of the first jobs that this board undertook was splitting the role of the combined GM and the COP, the general manager and the chief of police. How in the world can you have an organization in which the same person is having to oversee his own activities? All right? Harmon was having to be the general manager and the chief of police. So if you went to the chief of police and didn't get satisfaction with what you spoke about, you would be advised to go talk to the general manager. Maybe he would put on a different hat, or perhaps a suit, or I don't know what, and then he would be the same person talking to you again. This is absurdity. And when the board voted to separate the general manager and the chief of police, even board members who refused to do it all along applauded the board for doing it and said it was the right thing. I also want to say that we're not at half staff, Officer Foley. I believe that Chief Hull said that we have 7 sworn officers of the 10. 7, that's still, by my count, 6/10 is not half. 5/10 is half. That's the arithmetic I learned when I was in grade school. I just want also to say that it is far more difficult to expect people to volunteer now than it was perhaps 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. They're in a family where there may be 2 persons, both of whom are working. They're coming home, they may have young children to take care of. They simply don't have the time to be volunteering and spend a lot of time on committees. Okay? It is time that we have some professionals who are doing some of the tasks that the volunteers who are sitting up here are now doing. We need professionals. And this report, as I understand it, is not talking about 5 full-time employees. You're making it sound as if they want to hire 5 full-time employees. Nonsense. We have 5 different employees who are doing tasks, and it's a reorganization of how those tasks are going to be done. My last point here is that although we are not fully staffed with officers, somebody had pointed out more than once that we have not had an increase in crime. Isn't that interesting? I'm not inviting it. I'm not asking the people who are out there making trouble to come to Kensington. I live here because it's a nice community, and most people really are very nice. But we have not had an increase and a resurgence of crime. Okay, so please be reasonable. Don't slaughter these people for making recommendations for being more professional.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have 3 more speakers, and then we will call the question. 4. Okay. Stop.
Hello, my name is John Stein. I've lived in Kensington with my wife Kathy since 1982, and I am a former board member of the service district, so I've sat up here. I am reminded that during your campaigns for office, you all stressed the need for change and how professional, accomplished, and experienced you are, and I certainly hope that that's true. When I reviewed the July 11th proposal, the following questions occurred to me, and then I glanced at the proposal that was handed out tonight. I didn't see it before tonight. My first question is that there are salaries that are proposed, but there's no mention of benefits. So my question is, were benefits considered, or are these folks expected to be hired without benefits? No benefits? Thank you. My second question, is a part-time general manager capable and/or willing to manage the increase in staff members? And the reason why I ask that question is because when you look at the report that was prepared for tonight, if you go to the page on the general manager, page 14, there's a whole page on the general manager. It doesn't say once other than district manager. It doesn't mention the fact that he's going to manage anything. So, I don't know. I just asked the question, is he going to manage anything?
Well, it says asset management and staff, so yes.
Yeah, it's not real clear to me. To me, that's the first thing. My third question is, where will they sit? I've been in the police department often enough to know. Maybe, do you guys have a floor plan drawn up? So, but you don't have a floor plan.
Well, that is the responsibility of the general manager. That is not
Do you
dictated
have
by
a floor plan drawn up where you can share with the community where people are going to sit?
I believe we'll be able to fit the people. There's 3 desks in my office, and I'm the only one that uses it.
So you'd want 4 people in your office?
Well, I wouldn't want 4 people in my office, but not everybody will be working at the same time.
But you'd want more than yourself in that office then? I
Yes.
think that's what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. And then on page 7 of the July 11th report, it says, quote unquote, on one of the pages toward the end, right before it recommends approving, it says, we recommend that you research and include quantifiable offsetting savings in your staff report. And in the report that came out from Bob, which is not a staff report, but it's Bob's report, there is a page on savings, which I find very weak. It talks about eliminating the district administrator position for $80,000. That's pretty clear. That's black and white. You're eliminating it. But the next $90,000, what you talk about is a reduction. And to me, that's very weak. I don't know, does that mean that you're going to put in the budget, you're going to reduce $90,000 in the budget? Or is this kind of a hopeful pipe dream that maybe will happen and maybe not? And Bob, maybe you want to address that. Are you recommending that the board put it in their budget, this $90,000 reduction?
I'm confused. Could you repeat the question? The $90,000?
Yeah, if you go to page 15, where it talks about the offsetting expenses, it says there's $180,000 in new costs.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And then it talks about how you're going to pay for it.
Yes, offset by savings on.
Right, and one's an elimination. That's pretty clear. Everybody understands it's gone, that $80,000. But the next 3 line items, you're not eliminating it. It says you're reducing it, and that's a very weak term. So my question is, are you going to reduce your budget by $90,000? It's just a yes or no.
Could I suggest maybe that when comments are done, Mr. Dice come up and respond to some of these
Actually, a
points,
question
including
for the
that
general
one?
manager. This is his figures, and he came up with the cost savings.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, it's going to be a budget item reduction. Okay, that's good to know. To tell you the truth, I don't know if there are any...
Mr. Stein, just to add to that, these are estimates.
Okay, so it's not a budget, it's an estimate.
It is an estimate.
Thank you.
I think that's a fair comment. It is our intent to implement reductions. There's also, I tried to be conservative in these numbers. I think there's additional savings also. There's probably, you can reduce the hours of the general manager. There's probably another $20,000 in savings for the general manager. I think also there's probably some savings in litigation costs also. Hard to quantify them, but there's additional savings. These are our best projections.
I've been doing budgets for 45 years, and I've always produced a positive bottom line. And in my world, I look for hard and fast savings. So it's great to have good intentions. Everybody should have good intentions, but it's very different than actually saying we're going to budget this reduction and then we're going to live with it. And that's what I was looking for. We're going to live with it, and we're not quite there yet. That's what I'm hearing. In any event, I don't know if there's any really true savings and or benefits to doing any of this. What I do know is that we have a wonderful police force which remains understaffed, whether it's 30% understaffed or 40% or 50%, it's major understaffed. Speaking for myself, my number one priority for the board is a fully staffed police force. And based on everything that I've heard tonight, without getting into any of the gory detail, I cannot support any future additional taxes to pay for the administrative services that have been discussed. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that was a good beginning, huh? So, I'm Johanna Furman. I generally recover pretty quickly. And I'm both. I'm a public health physician. I've had a lot of experience in policy and running systems. And I have to say I'm a little embarrassed, not about the fall, but about coming to you this evening with so much of my time over the last years not really being here enough to be involved more actively. I had served as Deputy Commissioner for the state of New York, built the Division of Clinical Programs, run nonprofit organizations, and generally have a fairly good sense of building services from the ground up, running systems large and small. And one of the wonderful things for me about being here in Kensington over these last 10 years has really been about a community that has a vibrance, that has had citizen participation, and where the kind of transparency that I think we all want has really, that had been the history here. But this is really about change. So I'm speaking now about my own hearing and seeing, and I'm trying to reframe this to get out of some of the polarization. I think all of you on this board spend a great deal of time and energy, not paid, really trying to do a good job for the community, and you've brought in consultants. I absolutely supported the separation of the general manager from the police chief. I think it was a very good idea. And I have been watching and waiting to see what would happen. I have been deeply, deeply concerned about the financial issues and about the expenditures, the litigation, the kind of ongoing issues that have really changed the character of Kensington. And I think I'm speaking for quite a number of us here who feel what is happening to this community. I read over the report. I think you've had, Bob, some very fine recommendations. Clearly, there is a need to create change, to have a backbone for management and accountability that is necessary. But this is a small community. This is a community of 5,000 people. And we are being taxed through the nose at this point. Every year it's going up and up and up. And there does not seem to be the recognition about how these changes, were they to be enacted all at the same time, would impact that budget. I'm not clear at all about that. So I am asking for a couple of things here. I am asking a question. As you make a recommendation to bring 5 people in and replace some of the backbone that's been in there, that you think about and be answerable to this community about the impact that that's going to have. Because in every system that I have seen, when you do that, when you remove consistency, we have a general manager who, I think, to be fair, Tony, you are here half-time. And from my understanding, your preference has been to be half-time. That has been a concern for you. So as you remove, and this I do not know, Lynn, it is, forgive me, I do not know your last name, Lynn? Walter, forgive me, right? I don't know the personalities here. But as you bring in and fragment the individuals who are doing the services with all good intention, and you do away with a full-time position who has really managed a great deal, and I think that this community is in both for a cost escalation and fragmentation.
You should know the position is not currently full-time.
I'm sorry?
Just want to clarify, the position is not currently full-time.
Ms. Walter's position is not
I see.
full-time. Yes, never was it.
But there certainly is a depth of understanding and coordination that is taking place when I hear about the range of things. I'm not saying that you may not want to bring in some additional functions and people and bodies to do this, but to develop a plan to first of all understand how you phase this in rather than accepting this whole hog and see what the impact is going to be, that would be something that I would be asking of you as the board. For people who are representing this audience and people who have voted you in to be transparent, I would ask that that lower part of the triangle where you talk about corporate support and accountability and value systems, so far what I'm hearing, Bob, and I don't mean that you meant this, but what I'm hearing is that that's the job of the manager, and that's the job of this person and that person who are employees, when in fact it's our job. It's the job of this community to hold you and you and you accountable. And is there a way to thread the needle and to take the energy in Kensington that we had talked about, Sylvia, when you came to my house, that you were impassioned to bring to the board? Is there a way to use, I mean, people who have gotten up tonight to speak have a level of depth that transcends any of the consultants that you've brought in. So the idea that you might be using some of us in an advisory capacity to think about these changes and assist you with it and bring these pieces together is something that I would ask you to consider. And I would ask you to consider not taking a vote on this, because I don't think you're ready. I don't think that there has been, given the commentary that I've heard at my first meeting in several years, it doesn't sound to me that this is something that I want my board to be doing in representing me.
Thank you. I'm going to make a motion now that we vote to extend the meeting beyond our 10 o'clock time.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, the motion passes 5-0. We'll take, I think there are 3 more speakers, and then we are going to call the question. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Osmondson. I've been here since 1959, and probably won't be here too much longer since I'm 97. Anyway, and I'll make this very short because everybody's anxious to leave. I think you're making a huge mistake if you let go Lynn Walters. She is a jewel. And if you heard all that Officer Foley said that she did, she's holding this whole place together. So, and I heard you're going to replace her with 3 people. Well, those 3 people will never do what Lynn has always done. So I just want you to know you would be making a terrible mistake to let her go. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kay Reed, and thank you for your service, especially late into the night. So thank you for that. I have sat in Tony's place for years and years. I've run organizations and reported to boards. And based on so I'm kind of putting myself in your position as a board member and also thinking a little bit about Tony's job. My boards have always asked me, and Rochelle, you're very correct in saying that's not our job, that's the administrator's job or the manager's job. But I would suggest that, and I want to echo Dr. Furman's suggestion, that this whole thing be tabled for now. Every organization has a right to look and how to be more efficient. It has a right to look at its staffing. It's important that you are diligent about making sure that we get the biggest bang for our buck. But I'd suggest that you're actually seeing an incomplete plan. And the parts that you're missing, the financials, right? So we don't have a real specific, like John Stein said, what are the savings? What are the costs? Do those costs, I understand they don't have benefits, but statutory benefits are provided, and they're 6.5% of every employee's salary. Are those included? It's a small part, but it's part. Outsourcing. I'm not sure that the outsourcing for the financial services, outsourcing for the minute taking, has that actually been bid or at least looked at? Do we have that in a budget? You know, is there really a financial plan? Do we have the equipment to house these people? Now, the general manager is a much better person than I, because I would never want an employee sharing my office space. Because I would, you know, there's things you have to talk about. So you have to understand that if there's 2 people in his office, he's going to have to at times say, excuse me, I have a call that you can't listen to. And so are we going to be paying people to step outside while he conducts his business, or are we going to ask him to step outside on his cell phone to conduct business of the district? So there's that. And finally, I think it'd be worthwhile to look at a schedule. If indeed there are, however, X number of positions, and some may be in the office, some may be outsourced, but I think it would be within your realm to ask the manager for a hypothetical schedule. How does this work? Because we had this woman get up and say, I knock on the door and no one's home. And then we hear, well, don't worry, we'll work it out. Well, I'm really interested, like, how does that look? I mean, understanding it's not in concrete, it's not, but like, hypothetically, what does that look like? How would have one person have to be here every morning between 8 and 9 for 5 days a week to cover that? I mean, what does that look like? So that's part of the incomplete plan. The other costs that have not been addressed, but are real costs, are soft costs. So a manager spends approximately 40% of his time managing staff. So, you know, we have direct reports, they need direction, you have to talk to them, you have to, you know, pat them on the back when they're doing great, you have to slap them when they're not. You know, this takes time. So as you create a structure that becomes more hierarchical, you're building in supervision time into each one of those positions that will decrease their productivity because they have to go wandering around after that person. And the more individuals you have, then the more coordination you have to do. So people are saying, I don't know what my job, I mean, this is my lived experience. I don't know what my job is. You know, why is Susie doing that? I thought I was supposed to photocopy, you know. And so in some ways, having more people, first of all, I think personally there's an ethical issue with having part-time people and not paying benefits. To me, you know, that's Kay Reed's personal opinion. And I also think there's efficiencies of having more full-time people, because then they coordinate with themselves, right? You aren't having to coordinate the 10-hour-a-week person with a 20-hour-a-week person and wonder where, you know, again, spending that management time, putting them into place. Then what was new to me tonight was listening to the officer talk about the pros or various risks that seem to be associated. I mean, we're unique, that we've all said Kensington's so unique, and that's why we live here, and that's why we love it, or we hate it. But the uniquenesses of having a services district with police, and they're like intertwined. This isn't Berkeley, where the police department's down the street from the city manager, like they're all in the same closet together. So I don't know that there's been this appropriate analysis of the risks and the pros and the cons of the litigation side of this. Like, what police stuff do you have to keep reserved, and you can't have other people looking at it? And if that person, and this is what we need to know where everyone really is going to sit, is a person sitting in a spot where they're going to put us at risk because they're looking over somebody's shoulder, and that person is doing, that they're looking at the wrong stuff. So again, it just feels to me like you have not seen a complete plan. And even though we put our trust in these people, I think it's reasonable to hold them accountable for giving you a complete plan. Then finally, I do think, I lead a tiny organization. We're a national organization, but I'm a tiny organization. And I do many times tasks that are below my pay grade. And every time I sit at the fax machine, I say, I choose this. I choose this. I could have been, I could have a secretary, but I choose this. But I do that because I live within the means of my organization. And I enjoy the benefits of working for a small organization, right? So while there's maybe some things you have to roll up your sleeves about, maybe there's some benefits about doing that. And then finally, and this is just addressed to a fellow supervisor, if when you came to town and you saw that the filing systems weren't working, I'm certainly hope that you took that employee aside and gave them the manual about how to do it correctly and corrected their behavior, and that since then they've been upgraded, that we haven't waited a year to have it done, or whatever you found here, that you actually have been working with the staff you have to move them in the right direction so things are compliant with what we're supposed to do. So I echo others who said, this is a police district first and foremost, right? And that's our most important job. So it's not just staffing. We need to make sure they have appropriate training funds and ammo funds and gas money and every part that takes into being a police a ready police force. And, I appreciate, Celia, that thank goodness that it's not a problem, right? That it is safe. But, we aren't taking minutes, so nobody can read the minutes that we're understaffed in another place. But, sorry, that was a snarky comment. I find it really amazing that we aren't taking minutes, because how else do you know? And I realize we could all, get on a video, but really, come on, who's going to listen to 4 hours of this when they could look at minutes? Anyway, that's aside. But anyway, so the police, I think the building's important. You guys, everybody didn't want the first plan. That's fine. Let's do the second plan. Let's do it. And even though it's only $10,000, right now we still don't have a complete plan. We think maybe it's a $10,000 delta. I was here in this room a few years ago when there was a discussion about how we could possibly impose a $10,000 a year tax over the whole city, right, the whole community, because it was wherever you measure whatever that you re-up every year with cost of goods, and people were tearing their hair out that we were somehow adding $10,000 in income to the budget. But I see no one tearing their hair out about why we're spending $10,000 more dollars. I mean, we've had knockdown dragouts over less money. So anyway, I appreciate that, and I would encourage you to ask the general manager for a more complete plan and to table this action for tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening, board members, Tony, Ann, and the rest of you. First of all, I'd like to start by thanking so many people who said so many kind things. I am Lynn Wolter. I am the district administrator, and until recently, I have loved my job. I have helped almost every person in this room in one way or another, if not during the last 5.5 years, during the last 40 years. My husband and I moved here in 1978, and I promptly was asked to join the Kensington Property Owners Association. I served with that association for several years as its treasurer and then as its president. Gail Feldman now holds that position. I then was asked to join the Kensington Community Council. I served on that board for a number of years, and the year I was president, the effort to buy the park was initiated, and it began with the Kensington Community Council. I then ran for the Services District Board to see that process completed, and it was a joyous moment when there was an election and this community voted in large numbers to purchase the property that the Unified School District had declared surplus, and we subsequently turned it into our park. It has been an enormous pleasure, and it has been an enormous sense of pride with which I have served in this capacity, and I would very much like to continue doing so. There are a number of tasks that the board has taken on recently that I would gladly take on and that I am quite capable of taking on. I have the bandwidth, the experience, and the time to take them on. I am a part-time employee. I would continue to be a part-time employee. I enjoy the multiple tasks I get to perform. Most especially, I enjoy waiting on my friends and neighbors who come to the front window. And the most memorable moments are when there are medical emergencies that present at the front window. As a doctor's daughter, I don't become alarmed. Rather, I jump into first aid mode. I am the proud mother of 2 Eagle Scouts who grew up in this community center. I can't begin to tell you how many Scout ceremonies I attended here, and the proudest moments of that experience were when my sons attained the Eagle Scout status. And I'm not sure what else to add other than this report was a shock. I did not expect to be eliminated at such a, I don't know quite how to put it. I did not know that this was coming. I had no way to expect it. And I'm very disturbed that this has come to pass. So if this is the last time I get to address you, please know how much it has meant to me to be able to be your district administrator. Thank you.
Thank you. I closed, I'm going to call the question. Is it okay? I said that we would stop having speakers after 3. Is that okay? Thank you. Bob? That's fine. Bob, would you like to approach the podium? Do you have any conclusion for us? Any questions you need to answer, and then we will discuss amongst the board.
With respect to cost estimates of the staff, I included salaries and, as I mentioned, state and federal mandated benefits, which is essentially the employer contribution to FICA. There's some modest sick leave.
He says that he included state and federal mandated inclusions on the employee salary estimates.
With respect to, I think there was one speaker that spoke to this, and I think I'll repeat it. There was a lot of speakers talking about bureaucracy and a big city solution to a small district. Clerk of the board is half of a full-time position. Office assistant would be around 60%. The district finance and business manager would be 75%. General manager, I said 40 to 60%. So let's take the high side, 60%. Add all those up, they equal to 2.48 full-time staff equivalent. Remove the district administrator. That has a net of 1.48 of a position to manage the district. I don't think that's a big city proposal. I don't think that's a bureaucracy. In fact, you're getting the benefit of 1.48 full-time positions without having to pay for benefits. And the reason why it would be nice to pay benefits, your district just is not organized. You don't have the financial wherewithal to do that except for in the police side. So you're getting 1.48 of full-time positions without having to pay for benefits. It's a very efficient staffing model. On top of that, the reason why we're breaking them out into pieces is because you have this degree of skill sets. You have entry level, or what the labor market would say would be lower level skill sets, and you have very high level skill sets. Well, in order to get that high level skill sets, you have to pay pretty good salary. But if 2/3 of their time is doing lower skilled skills or duties, that's not a very efficient staffing model. So by breaking them up into pieces and paying them a more market appropriate pay for each of those skills, it's a very, very efficient model. Yes, it requires a little bit more coordination and supervision, and that's why the finance and business manager would be supervising one of them, and the general manager would be supervising the other. So, so I think it's not bureaucratic. It's not a big deal. It's 4 part-time positions. I think that's about it. I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you, thank you. Okay, so I guess I will begin. First of all, thank you all for speaking, all you speakers. Please understand that we appreciate and understand your passion. And we think that your suggestions, or I believe that your suggestions, I know, are well-meaning and heartfelt. But some of them I'll address because most of them I have explanations or replies for. First of all, problems with the safety of folks seeing information, staffing that they should not. In 2015, I completed a safety survey of the office. A 2-member citizen volunteer panel, then Sergeant Huey and myself, studied the office, and unfortunately, I don't want to announce it out loud, but if you stand in the lobby of our office, there's a safety violation for looking at computer screens unless staff shuts the door. So that's not a staffing problem, it's a community problem, and it's a space problem, and one that we are hoping to address. So our officers need to close the door when they're on computer screens, regardless of what staff is in the office. The second point I want to make is we are a unique individual community, but peer groups are important. And we, like it or not, are a government agency. So there is, in 2018, a whole series of professional standards that we must meet. And we are adopting those slowly but surely. You know, standards, if you think of us for a moment like a high school, high schools can be really unique, but there are whole sets of curriculum considerations that schools make because they're interested in having their children go to college. Well, we're interested in adopting all the requirements that make sure that you can function and interact with the information that is your legal right, and that we are not in future being censored by a government agency. And then there are a lot of soft costs that you're probably not seeing because we don't discuss most of our litigation in detail until it's finalized. So, or maybe even never. Unfortunately, there are things that are handled by our insurance company and costs that come up that we hope to reduce by having each set of tasks that we need accomplished in the correct basket. And this is because, and thank you, Bob, for your report. It's excellent. I found your findings to be spot on with my personal experience. And I know you can feel very impassioned about how we operate, but it is difficult to see until you are on this side of the table. It is difficult, I know, for all my board members when you have a consideration about looking for a specific piece of information, sometimes to know which employee to go to. And sometimes employees, because we have divided tasks a little bit higgledy-piggledy as it's come up. So our financial obligations are spread amongst different employees and not put together. We have clerical tasks that are spread amongst employees and not put together. And when you listed the responsibilities here, I think it's on page 5, under some important roles not fulfilled, I immediately put a board member's name by every one of the tasks not fulfilled. So it's not that we as board members want to do so much less. We're happy to be your volunteers. We're happy to do hard work. But technically, it's really inappropriate. We're meddling, and I know folks said, oh, community volunteers. We utilize community volunteers. You'll know the fire board does not. We utilize them on our committees. But we're entering into really gray areas there when we can't bring you in and share personal information with community members. If community members are in a volunteer position and they make an error and that results in loss of either income or time or a lawsuit, how is the board supervising that? There's very little repercussion or possibility, not that we would want to do that because people are well-meaning, but we need to have a professional standard, and we are not there yet. As Bob said, none of this is meant to be an attack on an individual. You may not believe that, but it's very true. What we are trying to do is organize our district that is in alignment with our peers. Because you cannot build districts around individuals. Folks retire, they get ill, they seek other opportunities. Sometimes without their, they don't want to get ill, they don't want to have to take a leave. We currently have that possibility with someone. If we have no backup, we are in crisis mode constantly, which is pretty much how this district is run for several years, kind of always playing catch up. So I propose that we accept Bob's study after, and I'd like to hear from other members of the board.
I have a few points. There's been a number of speakers that talked about the splitting of the general manager and chief of police position and how we have in the past had chiefs of police that performed to some extent general manager duties. By state law, we're a community service district, and by state law, we have to have a general manager. And I have seen the skills and expertise that Tony has brought to the position and very much have a high regard for what he has done to the district. With respect to how we have operated in the past, everything has become a lot more complicated. As President Chair Swat said, we are a government agency. We have bills, we have payroll, we have budgeting requirements, and everything is becoming a lot more complex, and there are some additional state laws that we have to comply with That's one of the reasons why we have the new website now, because we've had to comply with state law requirements for ADA access. And as a consequence of the complexity, as Bob Dice mentioned, it requires a specialty skill set. And I do think one of the benefits that we have with the report that has been prepared is a recognition that we do need certain skill sets, and as a consequence, there are some skill sets that are going to have a higher salary, but other skill sets that don't have to command that same salary, and it's a way to operate a little bit more cost effective. There's also been a number of comments, because we are the Kensington Police Protection and Community Service District, about police staffing. And as you all know from comments that I have made in the past and what you've read, every law enforcement agency is short-staffed. This is unfortunately a phenomena that's happened over the last several years. There's a shortage of police. And we have a particular problem because our salaries are low compared to other jurisdictions, as was mentioned earlier tonight. And so it's going to take a while before we can increase the salaries, but at the same time, we have overly generous retirement benefits and try to correct that ship. And it's, I'm understanding it's a lot more difficult than even turning around a very large supertanker. I am confident that our general manager will have a schedule of people if we do approve the study, so that people aren't tripping over themselves in the office. It is a small space, but one of the things that's nice is that we have been fortunate to have some flexibility on spacing. So those are my comments, and I will let others speak.
I want to say again, I think the report that Bob did is excellent. I've seen similar things before in my long years of government experience, and it's a very high-quality product. And I think that people are in a little bit of denial here in the 21st century about what kind of structure you need to run even a small community like ours. So as a proposal to restructure, I don't find fault with it at all. And I think it is foolhardy to think that we can survive without both a GM and a police chief as separate positions. And Tony's about the best we could have possibly gotten, and I hope we can hold on to him. He is getting burned up, I'll tell you that much. He's working more than we ever planned for him to work, in large part because of the inefficiency of how the inner office works. And you know, not everybody sees that. I had the fortune, I don't know if it was good fortune or misfortune, to see how it operated while I was board president, and there was an awful lot of management by crisis atmosphere almost every day as things happen. That said, the report that we're being asked to implement today came out with very short notice to the community. It's clear to me from a lot of the comments that I've heard this evening that not everybody's really had a chance to read it and think about it and absorb it. Even I would like a little more time to do that, although in my gut, I think it's going very much in the right direction and it's sorely needed. But there are some issues here. There's concern about the finances. Whenever you embark on a restructure like this, you do the best you can to estimate, but you don't necessarily know that it's going to work, and you kind of have to do it iteratively. You take a few steps, and you look at what it's costing, you make new projections about the future, and you refine things. So there is some risk in any new restructuring. Potentially, it should not be a whole lot of financial increase if you take the whole picture into account, although it could take a couple of years for the perceived benefits to bear fruit. So there's a ramp-up cost that may actually put a burden on us for a couple of years. So with this being considered, we have other issues looming. We haven't really gotten the complete story on the options for whether we contract our police services out, or whether we keep our own force, or whether we get into some kind of hybrid kind of arrangement. We haven't heard the full cost picture of what the options are, but it's pretty darn clear to me after hearing what we've heard from Mr. Brady that it's going to cost us more. And even the comment we just heard from Eileen about the police salaries being very low here, if we want to attract good talent here, which I fully believe we can, especially given the nature of the community, it's going to take more money being invested in the police, whether it's having our own force or contracting out. So that's a big expense looming in the future. There's the community center, and I do think we're still ignoring the big elephant in the room on that, which is that the fire district should be able to help us out quite a bit on that. But that's not a bird in the hand, it's just a very nice idea at this point. So that's a big expense. And then there's the public safety building, which is so far a can that's being kicked down the road. So there is angst about expense, and that angst about expense is quite justified. So I would like to see a little bit more time for the community to look at this report, for perhaps even have a community meeting. We've had 2 of those on the police. We might want to have one on this. And I do think that as we look at what our options are for the future, there should be some understanding of what the whole picture is. Cops, or I should say sworn and non-sworn sides of the house. So I think we need a little bit more time on this, and I'm not prepared to vote for it tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I should address the recusal issue. As I've deferred in general.
I want to say I don't think he should recuse himself.
No,
I don't go for that.
And I have to defer to the council, but I also don't feel that I need to as well. I think Lynn was just doing her job when she reported what she did. I don't have any hard feelings about that, so I don't see a reason that I should recuse myself. This is a study that was started a long time ago. It's professional study, so that's my attitude on that. A couple of things. I remember the discussion about the GM chief of police split wasn't anywhere near as this controversial, but there was a discussion if it was the right thing to do, could we afford it, and from what I've seen, that's turned out great. I only saw it after the fact, being on the board, but I look at the structure as really one of the best decisions the board has ever made, and so I think that that was also, I think, a recommendation, and it was followed, and it was really a good idea. It says it might cost another $10,000. I don't think this is only about money. I think it's about getting a better system in place for our district, where we run our own police department. It's not something to take lightly. I mean, it's a serious business, and I think we need to treat it seriously. So, I think the study does that. And I don't believe that this is tied to staffing our police. I think staffing the police is an ongoing issue, and we're trying to do it. I don't see how this implementation would affect that progress at all. I could be wrong, but it seems like they're 2 separate issues, so I don't think tying those together. And I'm look at it more, my experience more is in engineering and software companies, but it's my experience if there's a system where there's just one person that's critical to the system, and if they go, it falls apart, that's just a bad system. You can't have a system where it's dependent on one person, no matter how good that person is. I've been in, excuse me, situations where I've been the one, sorry, that knew everything, and I didn't like being in that position. I always try to encourage either my colleagues or employers to find other people that could do either the same thing or split it up, because again, it's not a good system to have. So I like this because it does split up the responsibilities into the proper places, and it does diffuse some of the risk of having just one person who knows everything, and it's admirable to have someone like that, but I just don't think it's a good system. So I think this is a good plan, and I support it.
I'll just make a few comments because I generally agree with what other board members have said. But what I want to say is, yes, Joanna, I really had a lot of enthusiasm and energy coming into this job, and I still do. But I'll tell you, nothing will sober you about the responsibilities and the difficulties and the risks and how close to the edge we are sometimes than sitting on this side of the table. And getting Tony and splitting that job was a huge priority and a huge important thing. And I'll never forget that the most important thing that was told to us as a board, and that we had to make a shift as a board and as a community, is that we don't run the district. We ask for broad policy, we want good services, we do oversight, but this is the person who is the most important person in the district right now. He runs the thing. And he's had over a year to think about it, to study it, to work with what he's got, and to spend a very long time. This is not the first meeting on this topic. We had a very full report November 6th. We've had another one today. It's been out since July 11th, and the first letter I got about this was maybe this morning or yesterday night. It's been available since July 11th. So, it was posted. Okay, I'm sorry.
On the site.
I'm sorry about that. Okay, I apologize for that. I apologize for that, but it's not a surprise. This has been going on for over a year. We had a very full meeting November 6th, and I read this over twice, and I think it's excellent. It is an amazingly thoughtful piece of work. The amount of time and effort that went into sitting with employees to talk about their responsibilities, that has gone into understanding, yes, we are unique. We are unique, we are small, and we are financially strained, and that has all been, I think, taken into account. I also don't believe that it is an either-or with the police and the district responsibilities and the park and all the things we have to do. It is our job to manage it all, balance it all. It is not an either-or. And the budget includes 10 positions with the police, and the issue is not that the money's not budgeted, it is that we have to recruit and fill those jobs. That has never changed. And I agree also, this is difficult because it's a personal issue. We have personal people. These are not nameless, anonymous faces in these positions. But it is true that if as Officer Foley said, that one person is holding the district together, then God help us, because that is not how a public agency must run. I appreciate the notion of systems. This is going to be, if this is adopted, this is not happening overnight. This is a reorganization, a change, but it's needed, it's important, and it's going to take time to have happen, and that is part of the general manager's role and job, is to take this plan and make it happen, if that's what the board decides to do. So I think this was a great piece of work. I appreciate the work that went into it from the staff, from the consultants, from the general manager, and I take the responsibility of the functioning of the district as a public agency very seriously. I think this is an important step forward, and in particular, the authority and resources necessary to the general manager to get this job done.
So, with all respect to Len, who I must say I value so much, and I would have never anticipated, and I appreciate your opinion, I'm going to make a motion that we accept and approve the administrative support and reorganization report and recommendations.
I'll second.
Matt?
Yes.
Their recommendations are 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yes, they are all split into separate, separate considerations. All right. Yes. Microphone.
And I've reread this, that there are no ordinances, there are no staff level changes, there are no budget changes as part of this motion. It's accepting the report and essentially directing the general manager to come back with those proper procedural items. And
All this motion is accepting and approving the administrative support reorganization report and recommendations. Other motions may stipulate other activities.
So just to clarify, that there are no positions being deleted from the budget this evening or added to the budget this evening. Is that correct?
There is no budget item on the agenda for this evening. There is nothing of that sort.
So there are no staffing level changes as part of any of the proposals before the board
The
tonight?
implementation is being approved. The implementation is not actually occurring tonight.
But I'm asking, are new positions being created and old positions deleted as part of this action? That's a very clear question.
Yeah, it depends on what you're meaning by that.
In the budget.
The board is authorizing the manager. Thank you. Go forward.
But this is an important aspect of public finance, and I'm sorry if you don't have a good understanding of public finance. But
do.
there are, when you have a public agency budget, you allocate positions. There are positions for the district administrator. Is that position being deleted from the budget tonight? Okay, thank you. There will be a future follow-up action before this board to do that.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a motion on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I'll call it. Opposed?
No.
Okay. Abstentions? None. The motion passes 4-1. All right, I'm going to make the next motion that I move that we approve the new job descriptions and pay levels as listed in the administrative support and reorganization report and recommendations. No, I cannot. Or?
I would hold off on that till we actually have a budget amendment.
Okay, that's fine. So items, just a moment.
I think that you can approve the job descriptions with the pay levels to be specified.
Okay.
Later.
I move that we approve the new job descriptions listed in the administrative support and reorganization report and recommendations. Excuse me, I'm sorry, our public meeting continues. We're happy to have you have conversation if you'd like to outside or in room 3. Thank you. All right, there's a motion on the table.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right.
That was approving the job descriptions.
The job descriptions.
And pay levels.
Not the pay levels, because that was on the recommendation of our attorney to not do that. Abstentions? None? The motion passes 4-1. So the next recommendation was to implement, and so
Unless the pay levels are approved, we can't commence recruitment.
yes, that's what I thought. Okay. So
Then perhaps you might amend the motion to approve the pay levels contingent on an ultimate budget amendment.
all right. So I'll make a motion that we approve the new job descriptions and pay levels contingent upon
An appropriate budget amendment.
an appropriate budget amendment.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right, that motion passes 4-1. So then we cannot direct the general manager. Can we direct the general manager to begin recruitment? Yes, we can. Okay. I move that we direct the general manager, Tony Constantoros, to begin recruitment to fill the recommended positions and implement the new staffing model, and authorize him to use human resource assistants to complete this task.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
The motion passes.
The last
4-1.
item does not require a motion.
No, we asked, Tony, that you, as the general manager, provide updates. I'm going to request at every meeting, every regular meeting, and prepare budget adjustment recommendations. Well, initially I said budget recommendations for our mid-year financial review in September, but that may...
It may not be that early.
Okay. But please prepare budget adjustment recommendations for our mid-year financial review in September, October. All right. Now we're moving on to new business. Item 8 A. Welcome, thank you, Mr. Aguilar, very late, Joe Aguilar, with Vavrnik, Trine Day and Company, and General Manager Constantoros, will you introduce this item?
I believe the general counsel has assisted me with
Oh,
this
I'm
item.
sorry, go ahead.
I actually did have the honor of preparing the staff report for you tonight.
Thank you.
Given the lateness of the hour, I won't belabor the details too much. I'm sure Mr. Aguilar can give you better answers than I can. The one thing I do want to mention is, although this is clearly linked to the prior item, the discussion of the
Madam,
prior
can you ask for
item...
order?
I'm sorry, our public meeting continues. So please, Mr. Spath?
Please take conversations
Please,
outside.
I'm sorry, could you please take conversation outside? Thank you. Sorry. All right, Mr. Aguilar, I'm sorry.
Much of the conversation tonight really highlights the need for this particular contract, particularly when it comes to financial functions, particularly payroll. The district simply cannot rely on one person to perform that function, or even 1.5 people when the half person may also be often unavailable. We need a firm that can be there regardless when we need them. And that Mr. Aguilar's firm can be that entity that provides us with payroll and other necessary financial services when we need them, as we need them, at an appropriate cost level. And with that, I will turn it over to Joe Aguilar.
Good evening, board members. I'm Joe Aguilar. I'm a partner with Vavrnik Trine Day. We are probably about the 98th largest CPA firm in the country. We have 11 offices. I work out of the Sacramento office. I draw on resources from our Palo Alto office, our Pleasanton office, and also from Southern California as well as Sacramento. My practice group, we specialize in providing accounting and consulting services to public agencies. We do this on a year-round basis. There's very little difference in the level of services we do from quarter to quarter. We serve cities as large as the city of Oceanside. We provide all their accounting services. They have a director of finance, and they have technicians that do the original books of entry. We do the middle core. We do full services for the city of Live Oak. We serve as the finance director. We have an accountants. We have an accounting manager. We handle their audits. We do their budget. We have a variety of staff members on our team. We have CPAs, we have MBAs, we have senior accountants. And what we do is what we found in kind of a phenomenon that's occurred in the last 2 decades is a lot of agencies don't need 40 hours a week of one classification. And what we do is we do assignments, and like in Live Oak, the finance director work requires 16 to 20 hours most of the year. Senior accountant goes in for 8 hours a week. Staff accountant goes in for maybe 12 hours a week. And we mix and match the needs of what the clients need to have for their operation. We serve a variety of clients. We have community services districts, Cameron Park Community Service District. We, the Georgetown Public Utility District. We have a lot of cities that we have served over the years. I have been in this industry 39 years. I started my career as a payroll clerk for the city of Laverne, full-time. I understand. I once had the relationship with the police department when I was the payroll clerk, and I was always their favorite because I made sure everything got paid, including their overtime. But at the same time, as I progressed through, spending the first 15 years in government, and then I went into the private sector. In the last 23 years, I've been at Vavrnik Trine Day, focusing on this level of service. I still work as a contractual finance director for a public agency. I have served as the interim finance director for the city of Dublin twice, for the city of Los Altos, for the city of Madera twice, for the city of Alhambra twice, for the city of Elk Grove, all while I have been working at Vavrnik Trine Day. They bring us on a contractual basis. And it's not surprising that a lot of the assignments I had, it's been twice, because the city manager just calls us and brings us back. And we're here to provide whatever services your general manager desires. What we're going to do is we're going to peel back the onion. look at what needs to be done, figure out the staffing level, and we have coverage with a variety of people that can do the same assignment. I have 5 managers in my practice group that are direct reports to me. I have senior accountants that have done payroll, and payroll is complicated, even for a small agency. You know, when you start dealing with the payroll reporting on CalPERS, you do it all electronic, it's all on the computers, and there's some uniqueness to it. And we have been called upon by other agencies at the last minute to do their payroll. You know, City of Madera, City of Sutter Creek, we've been called in at the last minute to fill in when they're just trying to clean it up. The City of Colma was another assignment we had. So we're prepared to do what you need to prepare what's needed to get you back where you need to be. And we'll be working with your general manager to decipher how some of these duties can be done and be done on a regular basis. At the same time, we can perform some of those duties that are needed right away. I'll be able to answer any questions if you may have them.
Thank you, Joe, for staying for the meeting and getting a little bit of an orientation on Kensington tonight.
Yes.
I wanted to note that I've been searching for an accounting firm, someone to do this function, but who had a specialty in assisting small local governments, and the firm was highly recommended by an accountant that is a very highly regarded accountant that has worked with the firm. And the firm has an excellent reputation in auditing, and this is one aspect of the services they provide. Joe's in charge of the services, and he's an instant on, and which is really something very appealing. He's also worked with Bill Zanoni, who has done help with our budget and the appropriations limit. So he has pretty extensive experience. Now, Joe, the $15,000 is just an estimate. We don't know exactly the extent of your services. We're going to start with probably accounts payable and payroll, and then we'll see where it leads to. I think Joe also has a background in systems. So as we progress, we want to look at improving our current systems, both in finance, payroll, and any other ideas that Joe may have.
Yeah, our primary focus would be on your original books of entry, making sure people get paid, your bill gets paid, any of the banking tracking, make sure that's all done up. And we'll be coordinating with with your general manager. Someday I'll learn how to pronounce his name.
Well, when you figure it out, let me know.
And you know, the $15,000 is just the starting point. We're just, you know, you're a small agency. I don't think it's going to take that much hours of work. It's just that some things we could get hung up on. You know, I think it'll take us through the first 6 or 8 weeks, but I don't know. And it just depends how much documentation you have, how much volume of work that needs to be done, and just also just the condition of some of your existing reporting. So we'll all find that out. And we've
Question for you, and Tony, together. You know, our payroll system is Byzantine. There's no other way to describe it, and it's unique. Another one of the unique factors of Kensington is our payroll system, and it's a kind of uniqueness that I think we would be better off without. So if we could make it a priority to fix that, I would be most appreciative among others, I think.
Yeah, I second. Len and I agree now on that, so. You brought us together this evening. I had the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Aguilar with the general manager and Danforth. And I have to say, he's given a bit of his resume, but I want to let the other board members know, he was just so very impressive. And the fluidity and function I think that he can bring to our district is going to be really great. And as you may or may not know, you know, we have some employees working on the financial side that need to have to be out of the office for various reasons, and that's thrown us into a bit of crisis, kind of really scrambling to cover so that we make sure that people get paid, and we're kind of at the point where we can't cover anymore. So
I noticed that you have 9 offices, but I couldn't find the locations. You mentioned a few, but did I understand you have an office in Walnut Creek?
Yes, we do. We recently merged, made an acquisition of a firm that specializes in pension reporting, and they have an office in Walnut Creek. And we didn't list it because we intend to consolidate that with our Pleasanton office, and we're actually looking at a lease in San Ramon. And they also have an office in San Mateo that we're inheriting. So we're wondering what we're going to do with Palo Alto and San Mateo, because they're both on the peninsula. But we have a lot of resources here in the Bay Area.
I have a question regarding your rates, and do you charge travel time for those rates?
No, we don't. You know, it's only in some unique times, like if you were located in Marin County, we would charge you for travel, because it's almost impossible to get there sometimes. It's just something about Marin County, but no, our rates do not count travel, only if it's agreeable to the client, and only in rare cases do we charge for travel.
I appreciate that, and I just caution both you and our general manager that, as you know, we are a very small and financially conservative district, and I urge you to really continue to be aware of that. I'm hopeful that the things you find will not cause us to exceed that amount, and hope we stay under it. But obviously, if we do find problems, and that's going to be something that I want the general manager to detail and you to detail, it's important that we as the board and the community members know what's really going on,
Yeah, we've done a variety of assignments like this. In fact, when we went to the city of Atwater back in 2003, and we basically, our job was to work ourselves out of a job. And we trained and groomed one of their in-house people to get to the accounting manager level to do the middle core, because it was more cost-effective long-term to do it in-house. And, agencies like yourselves, the thing we work toward is we want your referral. I'm a businessman. I have no problem coming in, doing the work, training it, and seeing wherever it's most cost-effective for you to get the job done with in-house people, or on like the payroll situation, outsource that. And you still have to do the PERS reporting, but that's different than running the payroll and the paychecks and paying the payroll taxes. There's just a different process there, and that will have to be figured out. However, that's only a task that's done every pay period, and you have to do it within so many days of your pay period ending. But we've worked in situations where we have groomed staff, we have assisted them to hire staff, and it is challenging to find the right people out there, but they are out there. And if you're looking for part-time staff, there are out there, and you just got to look for them in the right places, and we are well networked with other employees. I personally know several of the finance directors here in the area, people who have recently retired. And when you talk about a clerk of the board, my client, Georgetown Public Utility, they use a retiree who was a city clerk in a Bay Area city. She just happens to live in the area. She works 20 hours a week for that agency. They get excellent work done from her high-level clerk of the board work, but they only meet once a month, and they don't have an extensive agenda. So there are people out there that can do that are pursuing part-time work. So the thing is, you got to mix and match, and then you have to structure the setup so that you have the right effective delivery service.
Thank you.
That's a question. The initial engagement, do you have a goal for what you hope to accomplish, or is it just get in there and see what needs to be done?
The first goal is your critical items, your original books of entry first, payables and payroll, and your banking, and making sure those are operating, because they have to be done on a routine basis. And then we start folding back on the reporting, and then some of the other items like your budgeting. But your general manager has a good handle on your budget, but we want to complement them as whatever else they need, and how to pull the stuff out of the accounting system. Some accounting systems transfer information onto Excel, and just setting stuff up for the general manager so that he could have more interactive data off your system. Now, that might not be possible, and then you have to look at, okay, what do we track? And I'll tell you right now, what you track is overtime hours and overtime pay in the police department. and you track that on a pay period basis. Because if you track that, then that's where your budget lives or dies, is on your overtime and your salaries and the hours worked. And then you know how much money you have at the end of the year, and you make projections. And if you have to stack the information on an Excel spreadsheet, then you do that as well. So there's a variety of methods you could do. Even if you don't have a robust accounting system, you can, with just a few items, set up tracking on 3 or 4 expense items, 1 or 2 property tax or revenue items, and then you control that so there's no surprises.
And I take it you haven't really seen our accounting system, you've just sort of talked in general about it, is that?
You know what, I've seen a multitude of ones. I've seen the Byzantine ones. There's very few systems that I have not worked with in my 39 years. And I've seen systems where the guy who comes out on to do the update has a lab coat on, and I mean, this is just last year. And I haven't seen that in a while. But the thing is, we work with all of the systems, and the important part is to get the data to your general manager. And if we have to re-input stuff, then so be it.
I almost want to make you a bet
Okay, make me a bet.
that you haven't seen a system like ours.
Tony, what system do you have? Do you know the name?
I'll bet with you on that one.
It's a secret.
It is.
The
I've looked at it and discovered the answer.
Wouldn't take the job if you knew.
Well, Joe has indicated, I've explained some of the practices that Kensington uses, and Joe has indicated they're in the kind of like 5% of the agencies are outlying practices, and some of our practices fit in that 5%. We want to stop that. We want to be not an outlying agency that costs us more money to run our payroll system. We want it efficient, fast, and inexpensive. It's about time.
All right. We will take some public comments, and maybe you can answer some questions, because I see some folks lined up. Please. Okay.
So you don't have to stand. Let me just make one brief intro comment. It is possible both, does it matter?
Yes.
Really?
It's recorded. We know you're a...
I know, but it's not required. Well, anyway, I'm Rick Artis.
Thank you.
It's actually forbidden to ask that question by law.
We won't ask you.
I know. Anyway, I would just like to say, and I mean this is going to be hard to hear because I mean both parts of this. It is possible for one, actually for many if I'm a judge in this audience, to really strongly support what you're trying to do tonight and to feel that the process you used to do it was appalling, record-settingly bad, atrociously non-transparent, and the antithesis of what you ran on. And I'm really disappointed that you didn't do a simple thing to avoid what now will probably cost us more than the writ. You had that chance. I'm sorry you didn't. It would have been really simple and it wouldn't have cost us a dime. It just feels like the same ego stuff that got us into the problem with the writ. So, forgive me. Here's my first question for you. There's an amount of service and a broad scope, which sounds way broader than what we're getting into, but not a time period for any scope. So talk about the time period for a sec.
Joe had indicated to us an initial time period of 2 months. Is that, where's Joe? Oh,
There's Joe. He's over here by me. Sorry, we're wrong.
Is that?
And that's really payroll focused.
It is.
And if I understand the interplay between this proposal and the one that came before, Debbie Russell, the district accountant, will no longer be a part of our operations going forward.
No, that's not accurate. Debbie will continue working for the district. What we're looking for is kind of, Debbie's entitled to take vacation time. She's also been in an accident, still coming to work. And she's also been filling in Lynn Walter's absence. So she just needs help for her job, and we also need backup for all our systems.
Right, I strongly support your idea of putting payroll into the modern era, right? Financial analysis would be helpful, I think you'll find that, you know, Kensington's famous for having the most PhDs in a square mile, and we really like to meddle. So we like data, and the finance committee could be like 30 people who would knowledgeably come and pick nits. So there's a certain amount of reporting that's become de rigueur, and the process of doing it is atrocious. So there's lots to come from this. But that first couple of months, and the 15K is really focused around payroll.
Payroll and accounts payable.
Accounts payable, okay. So Debbie will continue primarily in her normal capacity when she's able, or mostly connected with the audit? Tell me a little bit about that.
Generally, I think we want to get some experience with Joe's organization first and see how it connects with what Debbie's doing. I think they can coordinate between the two of them. But I want to have some flexibility on that to see what works most efficiently and what's most cost effective.
But VTD is not doing the audit piece because that would be a conflict, even though.
No, understood. I was actually was going there just to confirm that that was not the case. But no, that's good, and there's, well, that's probably enough. Thank you. Monthly journal entries and general ledger postings. Can you explain that one to me? It's one of the, assist the district in composing monthly journal entries and general ledger postings. One of you wrote that.
It's accounting.
Is that along with our county reporting? Is that what you're?
Yes, there are a lot of transactions like your payroll, and when you do your PERS reporting and the banking involved with the taxes, you have to do some tracking in regards to that. And when we're going to look at how you're processing it, how is it flowing into your system, and what manual adjustments need to be made to keep your ledgers up to date. There's also your banking activity. You know, you don't enter those into your system on a normal basis. You have to update your general ledger based on that activity. So we're going to look at your bank reconciliations process and make sure everything is flowing into the general ledger, and that will require journal entries, and we'll coordinate that with Ms. Russell. You know, see how much is she doing? Is there a better way for us to do that? There's different ways to skin a cat and how you do the postings. It just depends on how your system works and how those routine transactions get into the system, and that's why we noted those, because the activity there's no reason why we shouldn't book those for you, because that's how we learn the process. When we go through a system, we actually want to have the hands-on and do the work ourselves, and then see how it flows through, and then we could give better recommendations to your general manager.
So some of this is, you might call it analysis and recommendations. And to do that, you might get hands-on in places that you wouldn't normally be. Yeah, right. Just to get a feel for the system, right. Right.
So 2 months from now, are you going to repropose an expanded scope of work depending on the results and come back to the board?
Possibly. Possibly not also. It depends on what happens during those 2 months.
Right, but shall we say, this is a proposal for 15K and a potential broad scope of services. If it goes beyond 15K, I assume you're coming back to the board?
Yes.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Dave Spath, you may have just answered this question, but I'm assuming from what I'm reading, the 15,000 is more for assessing the payroll system and providing recommendations back to the board. Is that the way I understand, over that 2-month period?
It's doing the day-to-day work, actually.
When you say the day-to-day?
Payroll, the accounts payable.
For just a 2-month period?
For an interim, at least to start, so he can get his hands around how much work is needed and how the work is done.
So they will undertake the payroll system for $15,000 during that 2-month period. I'm assuming then you will then continue it on, or is it going to be an assessment at that point, as you want to go forward?
Are you putting in a system for payroll and a system for accounts payable?
You know, part of this, as we go through your processes, your financial processes, you know, you have Debbie Russell on, and you have Bill Zanoni. And there are things that, as we go through your processes and we assess how it should be done differently, at what level you should hire out for this, whether you should go to Paychecks or ADP for the payroll, and we'll coordinate and see who is the most cost-effective way to do that. I take nothing away from Mr. Zanoni. He's a colleague of mine in this industry. He's very capable of doing the same things I do. The difference is I have 6 direct reports for me right out of Sacramento that can assist me on this. Mr. Zanoni does not. I have a pool of CPAs in the Pleasanton office to help me.
Well, we don't need any more of that. I think what we need to know is what's planned here. And if I understood properly or correctly, we are looking at structure, right? He's got to do this himself long enough to figure out how we do it, but then we're looking at a structural remake of how we do it. Is that correct?
That's correct. That would have to come back to the board, though, if there's a structural remake recommendation.
And we had an assignment in recent years where they had in-house staff and they also had an outsourced CPA, a local CPA. And during that time, we assisted that agency, and it was a community services district as well. They kept their local CPA on board for almost a year because there were things that were cost-effective to do this until they came up with a full game plan 9 months later. So we will work with your existing resources and see how best to manage it. But we do need to have the hands-on on each of the processes, because then we know where the pitfalls are and we know what the GL system is doing or not.
All right, well, I would hope that we would get a structural sort of recommendation pretty quickly, because we need it.
We will. The payables are payables, payroll. Some of the systems on payroll you do quarterly. So there's all these little odds and ends that you have to do. And like I said, we're going to peel back the onion and give your general manager some advice and see how you could use your existing resources to do most of the things.
So this is really a 2-month assessment of the system, and you're going to be giving the best recommendations that you can come up with for going forward for $15,000. Okay.
And we hope, as much as we hope I can imagine liking to work with Mr. Aguilar and how much we like to work with Bill Zanoni, if they both work themselves out of a job, we're happily.
That's fine. I don't see any problem.
Really
with that.
happy on behalf of the district.
You may want to extend the time, though.
I don't believe, do we need to do so again?
Well,
You didn't, yeah, but you didn't extend it for a specific time. I thought that was the requirement. At least that used to be the requirement. Maybe it's not anymore.
Actually, because I was wondering about that. When I've been here and there's been a time extension, it's generally been for a particular length of time, in which case you would have to go back. But since your extension was open-ended, I don't...
It was infinite. We could be here all night.
Okay.
No.
A change in policy.
I know, yeah. We know you do.
So I'm confused about the way this agenda item was written and what's actually been proposed, and I'm sorry to badger on. Sounds like you've already made up your mind you're going to do it. But so if I'm understanding, you have a 2-month contract for $15,000.
Up to.
Not to exceed.
Yes, up to, I understand. And it's on a time and materials basis. But for a small district with, 12 employees, how many hours, I don't know, do they do payroll every month or bi-week?
Do payroll every 2 weeks.
Okay, bi-weekly. How much time is that, and how much time is involved?
Every 2 weeks, twice a month.
For this small district?
2 weeks.
Well, he doesn't know that yet.
You have a similar size police department for a city we once served, and that used the same reporting system we currently have at CalPERS. So a payroll process will probably take anywhere between 3 to 5 hours, depending on how your MOUs are, how you do your certificate pay and the reporting. And let me tell you, about half that time is the PERS reporting, because your PEPRA employees are easy to report on CalPERS. Your classic employees are not, and you would have to look at the MOU and then also look at how your payroll system behaves on how that's reported. So then you might have to do some manual calculations, so that's why, but you're looking at about right around a half day every pay period that has to be dedicated for that time. And that person has to be knowledgeable. They can't just be an accountant from the private sector. They have to be accustomed to the acronyms that CalPERS uses. They have to keep things separate. Oh, and if you have a workers' comp claim on a police officer, then you just increase the complexity an extra 45 minutes just for one employee. So it's just, there are nuances to this. I mean, consultants that you've used, they know the headaches behind safety reporting and heaven forbid, a workers' comp claim. So, but that's the type of time it will take, you know. So it's not a lot of time. I mean, that's why we gave the estimate to your general manager. Payables is more the routine stuff, but some of those things may take more time too.
The other question I had, and maybe this is clarified, since I thought part of this proposal, your reorg proposal, was eliminating Deborah Russell's position, so I have a big question about your numbers, but before I get to that, so the question about internal controls that you have between your agency and the district and how you manage that. I assume then that Deborah is your point person for accounts payable? Is that how it works for your district?
Deborah's currently is the point person.
Okay, so then that makes sense that you have somebody, because I thought perhaps you didn't have a position. So then, this is not related to your contract, but could you just clarify then in your cost, whoever did the cost savings piece, there's two $40,000 consultant one's a financial consultant and the other is a reduction of other consultants for $40,000. The reason I thought it was Deborah Russell is because when I looked at your budget, I don't see two $40,000 in savings available. So where do you get that?
Well, the one is Deborah Russell. It's a reduction. It's an estimated projection. If you have a financial manager, her workload decreases and her needs are less. The other one is Bill Zanoni, who we would eliminate completely.
Okay, so that's
he's a good man,
budget now. Okay, so part of this is Deborah. So you'd be reducing some of the work or a majority of the work.
If this works out, if we implement this correctly, she will have a reduction in hours.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I thought Deborah Russell's yearly base was about $45,000. I believe that's what's on the budget, you know, these.
I don't know the number right off the top of my head.
Well, I looked it up, and I think that's what you'll find it comes out to be. So
I think Deborah was also in the coming budget year anticipating, she has built some things into the budget that she was anticipating with her position.
There's an increase, but the numbers are.
I was looking at the old-fashioned budget, which, you know, the thick one.
The intent is to continue working with Deborah Russell, but at a reduced amount.
Okay, but I was like Gail, that's what I thought I said.
Well, I'll check into that.
Close to that number.
All right. I'm going to make a motion that we accept the financial services contract and engage, Vavrnik, Trine Day and Company as proposed in the staff report.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? All right, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Aguilar, for waiting, and we very much look forward to working with you. All right. We're moving on to item 8B. The California Special District Annual Conference is from September 24th through 27th in Indian Wells, California. We must notify and make a motion that board members can attend this conference. It's an educational opportunity, and I'll tell you, it's been incredibly valuable for the district. We have no onboarding procedure. Actually, that is a role that would be filled by a clerk of the board, onboarding board members. And so this, in my experience, I've attended 3 years. I won't probably be going this year, but has been invaluable in providing information to the district to benefit us financially and in dealings with other government agencies. So are there any board member comments or comments from the public? If not, then I'm going to make a motion that we approve attendance for any board member who would like to attend the Special District Annual Conference. The district will, of course, incur usual and regular expenses for your attendance.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Yes.
All right, the motion passes 5-0. And please notify the general manager. I think the cutoff date for early bird registration is August 20th, but maybe the 24th. So if you can notify the general manager before that date, that's helpful. Then we can complete registration. All right, moving on to item 8C, Director Manager, Mr. Professor. It's getting a little late. Tony, would you like to introduce this item, please? Thank you.
Yes, this is the salary increase for the interim chief of police to reflect the MOU increases. It's a little different than the MOU increases. What I would like to do is increase the police chief's salary by 4% effective the beginning of this month. The MOU for the police officers was a 3%, but it was retroactive to January. So in lieu of the retroactive to January, we're just doing a straight 4%, no other changes for the police chief. And although this is not exactly this item, but since it was mentioned in the public discussion, I wanted to also note that there is going to be a salary increase for Lynn Walter and Andrea DiNapoli of 2.9%. Lynn's salary is currently $48.02 an hour, and it would increase by $1.39 an hour to $49.41. And Andrea's is currently $32.01. It would increase the salary to $32.94 an hour. These would both be effective July 1st, and funds have been budgeted. 2.9, it's essentially a CPI increase.
All right. We just want to let everyone know, these increases are the purview of the general manager. He makes a recommendation and the board votes on approval because they exceed his limit, but they are his to recommend and essentially give. So, any comments? All right, then I will make a motion that we approve a salary increase effective 8/1/2018 of 4% for the interim chief of police, Ricky Hull.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
All right, the motion passes 5-0. And we do not have to vote on the salary increase for the other two employees. All right, final item of the evening. We understand our calendar has been a bit mixed up this summer. We apologize. I am proposing that we cancel our August 23rd regular meeting because unfortunately we don't feel that we'll have a quorum of board directors, but that of course we continue with our standard second and fourth meeting for September and October of 2018. Of note, if you attend the conference in Indian Wells, there is a meeting on the evening of the 27th. Conference ends in the morning. Any questions? No, okay. All right, so I'm going to make a motion that we cancel our August 23rd regular meeting.
Second.
All right.
Whatever.
Let Eileen second that. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
All right, the motion passes none are opposed. All right, the motion passes 5-0. We thank you so very much for attending, and we appreciate your insight. We'll see you again September.
Motion.
We need to make a motion to adjourn. I will make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, the motion passes, and you win the Stay Late prize.